I need to share this before it becomes too late. Maybe someone can understand what I went through, or at least know my story if I never post again. 3 weeks ago, I accepted a job as a fire lookout in Black Ridge National Forest. I was in desperate need of money and eager to escape. My life had fallen apart after my divorce. Julia took the house, the car, and the dog. All that remained was a mountain of debt and an addiction to alcohol. When I saw the ad for a seasonal fire lookout position, it seemed like the perfect way out. 3 months in the wilderness, away from people, from the reminders of my broken marriage, from the liquor stores that had become my refuge. The job interview occurred over a crackling phone line. The voice on the other end sounded ancient, like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "Mr. Dawson, are you aware that this role demands complete isolation for long stretches?" I replied, "That is exactly what I want." "Good," the voice said. "The tower has basic facilities, electricity, a small kitchen, a cot, and a radio for communication. Your responsibility is to watch the horizon for any signs of fire and report immediately." Simple enough. I should have listened more closely when his tone changed. "Now, Mr. Dawson, there are important rules you must follow. Black Ridge has its own peculiarities. I'm sending you a manual. Read it carefully. Obey the instructions. Do you understand?" "Of course," I answered, barely paying attention already, picturing my freedom. Escaping the overwhelming pressure of my present existence, the guidebook arrived the following day. A worn, leather-bound journal. Inside, delicate, handwritten notes filled every page. I skimmed through, noticing peculiar details about times to avoid peering through the binoculars, certain radio channels that were forbidden, and unusual ceremonies involving a lantern at midnight. I wrote it off as initiation pranks for newcomers, or perhaps quirks within an overly bureaucratic group. How mistaken I was. They transported me part way, and then I trekked the final 5 miles to Tower 19. It stood magnificently, towering 80 feet, gazing over endless stretches of pine forests and mountains, slicing the skyline like jagged teeth. Inside, everything matched the description exactly. A simple yet practical kitchen, a tiny bathroom with a shower that only worked about half the time, an aging cot, a desk holding a logbook, and the centerpiece, a 360-degree observation platform equipped with high-powered binoculars. "Remember the rules," the ranger advised before departing. His eyes showed a glimmer of something I couldn't quite identify back then. Was it fear or pity? "Some instructions might seem odd, but they are essential," he said. I nodded quietly, watching him drive away, caught between feelings of liberation and uneasiness. That night, while unpacking, I found the manual slipped inside my backpack with a note attached. "Your life depends on this." Such a dramatic touch, I thought, if only I had realized then. Hello, viewers. If you want your tales or experiences shared through narration, just let me know. Let me share them on our own subreddit, which you can find linked in the description below. I will select stories from the community and narrate them, and occasionally we will host a 3-hour story compilation. The first several days were calm, scanning the horizon for any signs of smoke, tracking weather conditions, and observing wildlife activity. It was almost therapeutic, the routine gently silencing my thoughts. I even started following some of the rules more out of boredom than conviction. Then, on day 6, I defied rule number 1. Never look at Tower 14 through the binoculars between 3:27 p.m. and 3:42 p.m. That was the moment everything took a turn. I didn't even notice what I was doing exactly. It was 3:30 p.m. and I was performing my usual sweep of the horizon. Tower 14 appeared in the distance, approximately 12 miles southwest in a straight line. Nothing unusual about it, just another fire observation tower like mine. I directed the binoculars that way and adjusted the focus. At first, everything seemed ordinary. The metal tower shimmered under the afternoon sun, and the windows reflected light. Then I spotted something strange. There was no movement. Fire watchmen typically step outside on the catwalk regularly to get a broader view, but Tower 14 stood completely motionless. The more I concentrated, the more the air around the tower seemed to ripple, similar to heat waves but more intense and purposeful. The tower itself began to distort before my eyes, bending and compressing as if it were made of soft clay. Instead of steel and wood, I spotted a figure standing on the observation platform. It was not human. Its proportions were completely off. The limbs were unnaturally long, the head too big and distorted. It remained motionless, facing my direction despite the distance between us. I felt with absolute certainty that it was staring straight at me. My heart pounded as I pulled away from the binoculars, cold sweat forming on my forehead. I tried to calm myself with slow, deep breaths, attempting to explain what I had seen. Maybe it was heat distortion, exhaustion, or my eyes playing tricks after hours of gazing at the dull landscape. I glanced at my watch. It was 3:36 p.m. My hands trembled as I grabbed the manual and flipped through it. Rule number 1 warned never to look at Tower 14 through the binoculars between 3:27 p.m. and 3:42 p.m. Below that was smaller text with instructions if the rule was broken. It said to immediately close all windows and lock the door, then light the red candle found in the supply drawer. No radio was to be used until sunset, and I was not to look outside before the sun had completely set. At exactly 8:17 p.m., I had to say a phrase into the sink drain. I witnessed without permission. I apologize for my transgression. I seek no knowledge beyond my purpose. I stared at the instructions while a hysterical laugh threatened to escape. This had to be some kind of joke or initiation prank for new arrivals. But the memory of that figure lingered, the impossible proportions and the feeling it was staring directly at me. The laughter faded abruptly as my hands trembled. I shut the windows and secured the door. I located the red candle in the supply drawer exactly where the instructions had indicated. Lighting it, the flame glowed with an unusual crimson hue, casting a bloody radiance throughout the tower's interior. I settled on my cot, eyes fixed on the candle, resisting the urge to glance outside. Logic screamed that this was ridiculous, yet something deeper and more instinctual compelled me to follow the steps precisely. At exactly 8:17 in the evening, I crouched beside the sink, feeling utterly foolish, and whispered the prescribed words into the drain. The moment I finished, the candle's flame flared brilliantly before suddenly going out, leaving behind a trail of strangely sweet-smelling smoke. Restless, I slept fitfully that night, haunted by dreams of warped towers and impossibly long limbs. With morning's arrival, I nearly convinced myself it had been nothing more than a stress-induced hallucination until I noticed a message scribbled in the condensation on the bathroom mirror. It read, "1 transgression forgiven, 3 remain." Panicking, I wiped the mirror clean, my breath coming fast and shallow. How could someone have entered the tower while I was asleep? The door remained locked and the windows unopened. No one could have left that message unless they had been here the entire time. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, startling me. "Tower 19, this is base. Do you copy?" "Over." After a moment's hesitation, I answered, "Tower 19 here. I copy." "Over." "Just checking in. Is everything normal up there?" I glanced at the now clear mirror, uncertain of the answer. Regarding any communication, I lied and said everything was fine. It was good to hear that, by the way. "Did you notice anything unusual yesterday afternoon around 3:30? I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, that nothing strange happened. Why the pause? It lasted too long. No reason, just routine questioning. "Remember to check in at the usual times." The radio suddenly went silent. I sat there, gripping the receiver tightly, my knuckles turning white. I opened the manual again, and this time read it carefully. There were 27 rules in total. Some appeared ordinary, like always keep the window facing north clean. Yet others were deeply unsettling, such as if you hear your name called 3 times in a row at night. Do not respond, no matter how much it sounds like someone familiar. Feeling increasing unease, I read rule number 5. Never mention any strange events over the radio unless specifically asked. They had called me only once. I jumped at a soft tapping sound. Something was gently hitting the window. With dread growing in my stomach, I turned my gaze to see a large raven perched on the windowsill. Its feathers looked unnaturally glossy, as if wet. Its eyes stared at me with an intelligence that seemed impossible. In its beak, it held a small folded piece of paper. Rule number 13 said, if a raven delivers a message, accept it, never open it after sunset. I opened the window slightly and took the note from the bird's beak. It did not fly away right away, but continued to fix its gaze on me for several tense seconds before spreading its wings. As I was leaving, I carefully unfolded the note with shaking hands. It read, "You are being observed from Tower 14. They have discovered your name now. Stay cautious, James Dawson." Since my arrival, I had not shared my full name with anyone, not even during radio communications. Something felt deeply wrong in Black Ridge National Forest, and instinctively I sensed it revolved around Tower 19, my assigned tower, and whatever was lurking nearby. The following 3 days drifted by in a haze of suspicion and rigid adherence to rules. I carried the manual with me constantly, studying the guidelines repeatedly until they were etched into my memory. I could not risk another violation, especially since only 3 were left. My daily life became governed by strange orders. Each morning at 6:43, I was required to place a small portion of my breakfast on the eastern windowsill, following rule number 7, which stated a piece of your first meal must be given to the forest. I observed as birds or occasionally small animals came to eat the offering. There was one day when nothing approached and the food stayed untouched until nightfall, at which point it mysteriously disappeared. At precisely noon, while I was using the bathroom, I was instructed to wind an old brass compass found in the desk drawer, turning it exactly 7 times clockwise. Rule number 10 commanded that the compass be wound at midday with no more and no fewer than 7 turns. The compass did not seem to point north or any fixed direction. Its needle moved slowly, sometimes settling on one spot, other times spinning without pause. I realized that on certain days, the radio continued to emit a faint static noise even when switched off. The most challenging rule to obey was number 19. 1 hour before sunset, you must count all the visible clouds. If the total is odd, close your eyes for exactly 10 minutes. If the total is even, remain completely motionless for the same amount of time. Counting clouds accurately was a struggle, and I constantly feared miscalculating and breaking another rule. I ended up counting several times, always trusting the majority result. Today was my 9th day at Tower 19. The event at Tower 14 had left me shaken, but nothing as alarming had happened since. I nearly convinced myself that if I simply followed the rules, I might survive my 3-month assignment. I was mistaken. At 2:15 in the afternoon, I was making a sandwich when the radio suddenly came to life. Tower 19, Tower 19, come in. The voice was unlike the usual base operator. It sounded younger and female. I approached cautiously, recalling rule number 22. If you are contacted on the radio outside scheduled hours, you must verify the caller's identity before replying. "This is Tower 19, I responded. "Please identify yourself." "Oh, thank goodness," the voice exclaimed with obvious relief. "This is Emma Carson from Tower 16. I've been trying to reach someone for hours." I frowned. Tower 16 was about 15 miles northeast from my location, straight as the crow flies. According to my orientation, it was currently staffed by a seasoned lookout named Gerald. "Where is Gerald?" I asked after a moment of silence. I don't know any Gerald. I've been stationed here for 3 weeks, she said. Listen, I need to report something unusual. I've noticed smoke near your position, but it is not ordinary. Smoke, it moves against the wind, and sometimes it seems to form shapes. I stepped onto the catwalk and scanned the surroundings. The day was clear, with no trace of smoke anywhere, I said, while returning to the radio. It appears and disappears, Emma said, but that is not all. Last night I heard screaming coming from the direction of Tower 19. It sounded like her voice. Her voice faded into a whisper. It sounded like someone being attacked. I slept through the night without any problems. Emma, I believe you are mistaken. There was no screaming here. I know what I heard, she insisted, and there is something else. Have you noticed anything unusual about Tower 14? No one responds when I radio them. My heart rate increased. When did you try to contact them yesterday? Around 3 to 3:30 in the afternoon, the exact time I was instructed not to look at Tower 14. I quickly checked the manual, desperately searching for any rule about discussing Tower 14 on the radio. There was no specific rule, but rule number 23 caught my attention. If another lookout reports smoke you cannot confirm, or sounds you did not hear, end radio contact immediately and reset the radio to frequency 7.3. Do not use the radio again for 3 hours. Emma, I have to go, I said suddenly. Wait, there is something important. I need to say I switched the radio to frequency 7.3 as directed immediately. A faint, low-frequency sound filled the tower, not coming from the radio, but seeming to emerge from the walls themselves. It lasted for exactly 30 seconds before coming to a halt. I stepped away from the radio, my heart racing. Was Emma real, or was this some kind of challenge? I searched the logbook for details regarding Tower 16's present occupant, but the page I needed had been ripped out. Someone clearly did not want me to discover who truly occupied Tower 16. As I pondered this, movement outside caught my attention. I glanced up to see a deer at the base of the tower, which was not unusual since wildlife was common here. However, this deer was on its hind legs, its front hooves pressed against the tower's base, neck stretched upward as if attempting to see me. Its eyes shone in the afternoon sun with an eerie golden hue. Rule number 15 states, if wildlife acts oddly, note it in the logbook but do not confront the behavior directly. Instead, proceed with responsibilities as if nothing unusual was happening. With trembling hands, I noted in the logbook at 3:17 p.m. A deer was seen by the tower's base. I avoided mentioning its strange stance or disturbing stare. The deer remained like this for exactly 7 minutes before lowering to all fours and disappearing into the woods. As soon as it vanished among the trees, the tower's temperature dropped by at least 15 degrees Celsius. I gasped at this sudden chill. Rule number 8 says abrupt temperature shifts signal a weakening barrier. I lit the blue candle. I found the blue candle in the same drawer as the red one and lit it with trembling fingers. The flame glowed with a rich sapphire hue. Turning to page 43, I spotted a paragraph written in what appeared to be Latin. I tried my best to pronounce the words without understanding their meaning. As I uttered the last syllable, the candle's flame surged upward nearly 1 foot before settling back to its usual size, and the temperature slowly returned to what it was before. What on earth was going on? What invisible barrier was fading? The rules clearly offered some protection, but from what exactly? As evening drew near, I followed rule number 19, counting clouds. 7, an odd number. I closed my eyes for 10 minutes. When I opened them, I nearly screamed. Written on the window before me, seemingly in condensation yet impossible due to the warm temperature outside, were the words, "Julia is not at Tower 16. Julia was never at Tower 16. The writing disappeared as I stared at it, evaporating within seconds. The rest of the evening I jumped at every noise, carefully examining the manual for any rules I might have overlooked. Around 9 p.m., I decided to try to sleep, hoping the situation would appear more reasonable in the morning. Just as I was dozing off, the radio crackled again with a raspy whisper, barely audible. "James?" it said. "James Dawson." I sat up abruptly. Rule number 5 flashed through my mind. If you hear your name. A name was called 3 times in a row during the night, yet there was no response, no matter how much it sounded like someone familiar. I held my breath, waiting. James, the voice became clearer now, and with a sudden flash of recognition, I realized it perfectly matched Julia, my ex-wife. James, that was said twice one more time, and the rule would come into play. I stared at the radio, entranced and frightened. "Help me, James." The tone shifted, turning desperate and full of pain. "They have me. They are taking me to Tower 14. Please, James." It was not repeated 3 times consecutively, so the rule did not apply, but every part of me screamed that answering would be a dreadful mistake. "Julia." I whispered, not into the radio, but to myself, "That cannot be true." The radio crackled with static. "Then of course it is possible, James. I've been trying to locate you. I made an error. I want you back. I am in the forest." "James, I intended to surprise you, but I became lost, and now something is chasing me." I reached for the manual, my hands shaking so intensely I struggled to turn the pages. There must be a rule for this scenario. Rule number 24, if the radio communicates personal truths that nobody else could possibly know, immediately cut the power and recite the Lord's Prayer backward. I hesitated. Julia had said she wanted me back, that she had made a mistake, but those were not personal truths, only I wished to hear. "Remember when you proposed, James," the radio continued on the Ferris. "At Navy Pier, you dropped the ring inside the wheel, and we had to bribe the operator to halt it so we could search for the lost item." My blood felt as if it had frozen. It was true. We discovered the ring stuck within the seat's mechanism. Nobody else had been near. No one else was aware of the event. Without hesitation, I reached for the power cord and yanked it out from the outlet. The radio instantly fell silent. Taking a shaky breath, I started to recite the Lord's Prayer backwards, struggling with the unfamiliar sequence of words. When I finished, I was soaked in sweat, my throat sore. For several minutes, I remained in complete silence. The darkness of the tower was interrupted only by moonlight streaming through the windows. Then, from the direction of Tower 14, a column resembling smoke began to rise. However, as Emma had explained, it defied the wind's path and did not disperse like ordinary smoke. Instead, it gathered, shaping itself into a figure, the outline of a woman. I scrambled for the manual, frantically flipping through the pages until I found rule number 17. If smoke moves unnaturally after sunset, it is not ordinary smoke. Do not stare at it directly. Instead, draw the symbols from page 62 on all the windows using the salt provided. I found the salt shaker in the kitchen cabinet and, consulting the unfamiliar symbols on page 62, traced them onto each window pane with a finger dipped in salt. As I completed the final symbol, a fierce wind suddenly lashed against the tower, causing the entire structure to creak and sway. Outside, the smoke figure was torn apart and vanished amidst the gale. I collapsed onto my chair, utterly drained. I was terrified, wondering what new nightmare I had stumbled into. These were not merely guidelines. They served as safeguards against some dark force. As if responding to my silent question, my gaze landed on a section at the very end of the manual, one I had overlooked before. "The boundary between worlds is most fragile at Tower 19, it read. What lurks beyond longs to cross over. The rules are meant to keep it away. Defy them at your own risk. It knows your desires and your fears and will exploit both to manipulate you. After 3 violations, the barrier will give way." I had been here only 9 days, and there were 81 to go. Something seemed intent on pushing me to break these rules. I woke to the sound of knocking, nothing like the usual creaks of the tower or branches brushing the windows. This was purposeful, rhythmic knocking. 3 rapid taps, a pause, then 3 quick taps again, repeating endlessly. The room was still engulfed in darkness. My watch showed 3:17 a.m. The knocking did not come from the door or any window, but from the trap door leading down to the maintenance area beneath the floor. My heart pounding, I grabbed the manual. The pages were damp with my sweat, making it hard to turn them quickly as I searched desperately. Where had I seen something about knocking? Rule number 11. If you hear knocking from places where no one should be, count the knocks. Even numbers are safe, but odd numbers demand immediate response. 3 knocks is an odd number. The guidelines went on to say, for odd counts, ignite a white light immediately. Take a candle and position it right where the sound is coming from. Do not utter a single word until the knocking ceases. If the candle evokes a voice, put it out immediately and burn sage throughout every corner of the tower. I discovered a white candle, and with trembling hands, I lit it. The trap door kept its steady knocking pattern as I moved closer. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. I placed the candle atop the trap door, watching wax drip down onto the old worn wood. Suddenly, the knocking stopped at once. That silence was even more chilling than the noise had been. Frozen in place, barely daring to breathe, I waited. 1 minute went by, then 2, then 5. Just when I began to feel safe, thinking the threat had vanished, a voice emerged from below the trap door. It sounded soft and childlike, but carried a strange hollow tone that sent shivers down my spine. "Please let me in. I'm cold. I'm scared," it whispered. Without hesitation, I blew out the candle. The instructions hadn't said I could speak yet, so I stayed quiet as I searched for the bundle of sage among the supplies. I found it and lit it with my lighter until it smoked faintly, the strong scent filling the tower. Moving from corner to corner, I waved the bundle of burning sage just as I was told. Suddenly, the childlike voice said, "You're being very rude," but now it was rough and harsh instead of soft. The trap door rattled, as if something was pushing against it from below. "I know you're alone up here. I know you're scared. I could keep you company," the voice added. I kept up the sage ceremony as I moved to the last corner, waving the smoking sage bundle, while the voice echoed from beneath. Beneath the trap door, a deep, moist growl arose once more. "When I enter, I will wear your skin." The trapdoor slammed upward violently, yet only for a brief moment before crashing back down. Something had attempted to break through but failed. The rules had shielded me. I spent the remainder of the night sitting against the distant wall, clutching the manual to my chest, fixated on the trapdoor until the first light of dawn finally filtered through the windows. After sunrise, I carefully approached the trapdoor and used a broomstick to push it open. Below, there was nothing but the expected maintenance cavity, filled with dusty cobwebs and entirely vacant. No trace remained of whatever had knocked or spoken, but on the underside of the trapdoor itself, burned into the wood as if by a searing brand, was a handprint too large to be human, with fingers that were unnaturally long and jointed. I allowed the trapdoor to fall shut and placed the heaviest items I could gather on top of it: my backpack, a box of supplies, and the metal toolbox. It was a symbolic gesture in case whatever had almost forced its way through decided to try again, yet it made me feel somewhat safer. At 9:30 in the morning, the radio crackled to life for the scheduled check-in. "Tower 19, this is B-Case Daily Check-in. Do you copy?" I picked up the receiver, hesitating before replying. "Tower 19 here. I copy. Any incidents to report?" The operator's tone was professional and neutral. I thought about the knocking, the voice, and the burned handprint. Rule number 5 of the handprint code stated never to report any unusual events over the radio unless specifically asked 3 times. I responded with no incidents and all quiet here. The weather information included clear skies and a gentle breeze coming from the northeast with a temperature of about 70 degrees. Just as the transmission ended, I sensed something unusual. Typically, the operator would conclude with a wish for safety today, but this time, that phrase was missing. Although it was a minor change, my heightened paranoia made it feel important. I consulted the manual again, finding rule number 25, which warned that if BAS strayed from normal communication procedures, they could be compromised. In such cases, radio silence must be kept for the next 24 hours, and the purification ritual from page 78 should be performed before each meal. Feeling increasingly uneasy, I flipped to page 78. The purification ritual looked odd but straightforward. I was required to draw a salt circle around my plate, say a short chant, and add 3 drops of my own blood into my drink. The manual did not clearly state the blood part, but there was an instruction to put 3 drops of essence into the beverage alongside a picture of a pricked finger, which made the meaning clear. Wonderful. Now I had to bleed into my coffee. This job was becoming more and more bizarre by the minute. Preparing my lunch, a sorry sandwich made of somewhat stale bread and canned tuna, I carefully followed the ritual. The chant was written in the same strange language I'd seen before, and I did my best to pronounce the alien syllables correctly after placing 3 drops of blood into my drink. Blood mingled with my water as I carefully pricked my finger using a safety pin. I saw the liquid briefly swirl with thin red strands before clearing once more. I ate my lunch cautiously, half expecting to collapse, poisoned, but nothing happened, at least nothing immediately visible. The afternoon went on with me carrying out my usual duties, scanning the horizon for smoke, noting weather conditions, and keeping the logbook updated. These repetitive tasks helped keep me somewhat grounded, yet I stayed alert, constantly consulting the manual and checking the time to avoid missing any time-sensitive rules. At 4:51 p.m., I stood on the catwalk conducting my afternoon scan when I noticed something odd near the base of my tower. The ground was trembling. Initially, I assumed it was an animal, maybe a coyote or a fox, but looking more closely, I saw the earth itself was shifting, as though something large was burrowing just beneath the surface. The movement circled my tower once, then twice, then 3 times before halting directly beneath the north side. The earth swelled upward faintly, then settled back down. I flipped through the manual, anxiety mounting, but found no exact instruction for moving ground. The closest was rule number 20, which advised that if the natural environment acts abnormally, one should record it carefully in the logbook and avoid touching the affected spot for 24 hours. I recorded the event meticulously, detailing the precise time and location. As I wrote, I heard a soft sound. A scraping noise came from the outer wall of the tower, as if something was climbing upward. I froze, my pen pressed against the paper without moving. There was a pattern of scrape, then pause. Scrape, then pause. Something was certainly ascending the wooden boards of the tower. I quietly moved toward the window closest to the sound. Staying hidden to the side to avoid being noticed, at first I saw nothing. Then a hand appeared on the window ledge. It looked human, yet off. The skin was an unnatural pale grayish white. The fingers were too long and bent at strange angles. The hand gripped the ledge tightly, its long nails digging into the wood. I stumbled back, placing a hand over my mouth to hold in a scream. Rule number 9 said if anything tries to enter the tower, remain completely silent and still until it goes away, never look it directly in the eyes. I pressed myself against the farthest wall, staring down at the floor, listening carefully as the creature outside the window continued trying to find a way inside. The hand disappeared from the ledge, and I heard scraping moving along the wall toward the next window. For more than an hour, I stayed frozen, barely breathing as the entity circled the tower, testing every single window and the door. Eventually, as the sun started to set, The sound stopped. Still, I did not move for another 30 minutes, scared it could be lying in wait. When I finally dared to look outside, there was nothing at all, except on every window ledge and the door frame were deep scratch marks that had not been there before. That night, I broke my own rule and moved the cot to the center of the main room, far from the walls and especially the trap door. I formed a circle of salt around myself, placed a burning red candle at every cardinal point, and kept the manual and a container of salt close by. Despite my overwhelming exhaustion, I fought desperately to stay awake, terrified of what might happen if I fell asleep, but eventually my body surrendered and I slipped into slumber. In my dream, Julia and I were back in our apartment, everything feeling normal. She was in the kitchen making coffee, softly humming to herself. I came up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "I have missed you," I said. She turned in my arms, smiling. "I've missed you too." "Why did you leave me, James?" I protested. "I did not leave you. You left me. You took everything." Her smile stayed, but her eyes turned sad. "Is that the story you tell yourself, that I am the villain in your life?" The kitchen started to distort, the walls bending and twisting. Julia's face stayed perfectly clear. "You never told me why you lost your job," she said. "Why you started drinking, why you became so distant. You just let me believe it was all my fault." The walls melted away now, running like wax, and behind them stretched a forest, dark and thick. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and I meant it. I was ashamed. I could not face her. Julia stroked my cheek, but her hand felt wrong, the fingers too long, the joints too flexible. "You still have not faced it," she said. "You, James, that is the reason you're here, is it not?" Trying to flee once again, her expression started to transform, barely noticeable at first. Her eyes became just a bit too large, her smile stretching beyond what should be possible. "Yet you cannot escape what inhabits Tower 14, she said, her voice distorting. "You cannot escape what approaches Tower 19. I attempted to break free, but her arms, now unnaturally long and unsettling, gripped me firmly. "What is it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What lies within Tower 14? What is coming for me?" Her face was almost unrecognizable, as its features shifted and rearranged into something alien. Only her eyes remained unchanged. Julia's eyes, filled with sorrow and understanding. "The rules are collapsing." "James," she spoke, her voice a dissonant chorus of whispers. "2 more violations and the barrier will fall. When it does, they will all pass through. Tower 19 is the gate, and you are the key." I awoke suddenly, gasping, sitting upright. The salt circle around my cot was broken. A gap approximately 6 inches wide had formed. The salt was scattered as if brushed away by something unseen. The candles had extinguished. Morning sunlight poured through the windows, and on the wall, written in what appeared to be ash, were the words, "2 violations remain. Tower 14 waits." I rushed to my feet, searching the tower frantically. Nothing appeared disturbed except the broken salt circle. There were no signs of any intruder. But as I moved toward the sink to cleanse my face, I spotted something disturbing in the mirror. My reflection seemed off, my eyes slightly too large. My reflection smiled too broadly when I was not smiling at all. I blinked and the image adjusted, becoming my usual reflection again. I felt like I was losing my mind. It had to be the isolation and fear causing me to experience hallucinations. Yet the scratches on the windowsills were genuine. The handprint on the tarp was real, and the broken salt circle was authentic. The rules continued to work, keeping me protected. I had to concentrate on following them exactly. No more slips, no more errors. 78 more days until my contract ended. I just had to endure. As I flipped through the manual to verify the morning instructions, a small note slipped out, a scrap of paper I had never noticed before. Written in handwriting, unlike the rest of the manual, was one sentence. The previous watchman broke all 4 rules. That was why something lurked near Tower 19 now. That note about the former watchman haunted me deeply. I searched the tower for any clues about who had preceded me, but found nothing. No personal effects left behind, not even initials engraved into the desk, nor a name recorded on the first page of the logbook where it should have been. It was as though the last occupant had been intentionally erased. While preparing my breakfast of instant oatmeal with the last of my fresh blueberries, I carried out the purification ritual meticulously. The blood from my fingertips swirled in my coffee before vanishing. Like the day before, I was getting accustomed to the metallic taste it gave my drink, which unsettled me more than the action itself. Exactly at 6:43 a.m., the day began once again. I placed a portion of oatmeal on the eastern window ledge as instructed. From inside, I observed a raven, possibly the same bird that had brought the message several days earlier. It landed and pecked at the offering, but then stared at me with those unusually intelligent eyes, tilted its head, and flew away without eating a single bite. A chill settled deep in my stomach. I referred to the manual, focusing on rule number 7, which stated that if the offering is declined, danger is near. It advised staying indoors until midday and scattering salt on all entryways. I spent the morning restless, jumping at every creak and groan of the ancient tower. Exactly at noon, I conducted the compass-winding ritual described in rule number 10. I felt uneasy as the needle spun endlessly without settling on any direction. I recalled an earlier note stating that on days when the compass needle failed to stop turning, the radio would emit static even when switched off. As if on cue, the radio began to hiss softly despite being unplugged. Ever since the Julia incident, the static rose and fell in a rhythm almost resembling breathing. While scattering salt across the doorway and the window ledges as instructed, I sensed a peculiar resistance in the atmosphere, as though I were moving through water. The temperature shifted drastically, from uncomfortably warm to cold enough to see my breath, then back to normal, all within minutes. According to rule number 8, sudden temperature fluctuations indicate the barrier is weakening. The manual instructed to light the blue candle and recite the incantation printed on a specific page to counter this. With trembling hands, I lit the blue candle and repeated the Latin-like spell for the second time. The candle's flame flickered and wobbled, but it did not rise like before. Instead, it bent at an unnatural angle, as if responding to a breeze that did not exist, directing itself toward the trap door. Whatever entity had come the previous night was still lingering beneath the floor. The radio emitted static that shifted into patterns almost resembling words. I fought the urge to listen closer, yet I found myself leaning in, trying to make sense of James Rule's tower. 14 as a sudden sharp knock at the door startled me, my heart racing. 3 rapid knocks echoed, identical to the ones I'd heard on the trap door. I froze, recalling rule number 11 about odd-numbered knocks. I needed a white candle, but all of mine were stowed away in the supply drawer across the room beyond the trap door. The knocking resumed, more urgent, 3 firm raps once again. Taking a steady breath, I edged carefully around the trap door, hugging the wall to stay as inconspicuous as possible. I reached the supply drawer and grasped a white candle with quivering fingers. As I turned back, the trap door trembled faintly, as if something underneath pressed upwards. The knocking persisted, now joined by a soft scraping noise along the walls. Whatever was beneath was attempting to break in. From outside, there seemed to be some sort of collaboration. Cautiously, I moved toward the door, clutching the white candle and lighter, just about to set the candle down when I placed the candle against the door as instructed, but hesitated because something felt off. I checked the manual once more. Rule number 11 stated that one should knock only from places where no one would usually be, yet where someone could still legitimately stand by the door. Perhaps another ranger or a hiker in distress. In such cases, that rule might not apply, but rule number 6 definitely did. Before opening the door to anyone, verify their identity by asking 3 questions only they could answer. If their answers were accurate, but something still felt wrong, I would need to perform the verification ritual found on page 32. "Who is there?" I called out, my voice surprisingly steady. "Forest Service," came the response, a man's voice firm, calm, and professional. It was described as a routine inspection. Relief swept over me. This was normal, part of the job, nothing supernatural about a Forest Service inspection. Yet doubt gnawed at me. The radio operator, who might have been compromised, had not mentioned any inspection during our last check-in. I asked, "What is your name and position?" He answered following protocol. "Ranger Mike Hawkins, District Supervisor. I need to inspect the tower for our quarterly assessment. Please open the door." The name sounded believable, but I had no way to confirm it. I needed to ask my 3 questions. What date was my orientation? There was a pause. "June 10th, the voice replied. That was correct. I had started orientation on June 10th, arriving at the tower 3 days later. Who conducted my interview? The pause was longer this time. Regional Director Peterson conducted phone interviews for all seasonal positions, he said. That was also correct. My initial relief softened but persisted. The last question was about the tower's call sign. Tower 19, named Black Ridge in the northern quadrant, used the call sign Oscar Echo 3, India. I frowned because I did not know my tower's call sign. It could be right, but there was no way for me to confirm it. "Just a moment," I said as I turned to page 32 to check the verification procedure. That page explained a simple test. Draw a specific symbol on the paper and slide it under the door. A legitimate Forest Service worker would recognize this as part of the fire tower security protocol and respond with the proper symbol. I quickly drew the symbol, a triangle with a horizontal line across it, and pushed it under the door. "What is this?" The voice outside sounded confused and then irritated. "Look, I do not have time for games. Open the door now, or I will report your non-compliance." Any real ranger would know the process. My heart started pounding again. Whatever was out there was not Ranger Mike Hawkins. I said, "I'm sorry, but I cannot open the door right now. Please come back tomorrow." There was silence. Then the voice shifted. It grew deeper and developed a wet, gurgling tone that made the hair on my arm stand on end. "Open the door, James Reynolds. We have been very patient. Open the door, or we will find another way inside." I took a step back, nearly falling over, knowing that the rules had been designed to keep me safe from this very thing, the presence that haunted the area around Tower 19. The knocking started again, no longer just 3 taps, but a relentless pounding. The entire door trembled violently in its frame, and the windows started to shake as well. The trappo bounced and knocked against the items I had piled on it. In a surge of panic, I grabbed the manual and flipped through the pages desperately. There had to be a guideline for this kind of situation, for when an attack comes from every direction. Rule 27 stated that in case of a direct assault on the tower, one must create a circle of protection by mixing salt, your own blood, and ash from the fireplace. Then, you draw the symbol shown on page 86 on the floor and stand inside it without leaving until the attack ends, no matter what you see or hear. I moved quickly, cutting my palm with a kitchen knife and blending my blood with both salt and the fireplace ash in a bowl. The pounding and scratching grew more intense, making the whole tower seem to moan under the pressure. Using a spoon, I carefully dripped the mixture onto the floor as I traced the intricate symbol outlined on page 86. It was a circle enclosing a 5-pointed star surrounded by strange glyphs and smaller interlinked circles. The moment I finished the last stroke, the assault on the tower stopped abruptly. The sudden silence felt even more terrifying than the noise had been. I stood firmly within the circle, my blood still dripping from my palm, listening intently. Minutes slipped by in eerie quiet, then a faint sound grew steadily louder. It was the soft weeping of a child, crying just outside the door. "Please," a small voice sobbed. "I'm hurt. I'm lost. Please help me." My heart tightened, but I did not break the circle. The rules had kept me alive until now, and I could not afford to break them. Suddenly, I saw you through the window, the child's voice whispered. "I know you are inside. Why won't you help me? It is getting dark, and I am scared of the dark." I squeezed my eyes tightly, struggling to block out those desperate sounds. This could not be a real child. The voice simply could not be real. Then the voice shifted abruptly without warning, becoming Julia. James, thank goodness I've been looking everywhere for you. There is something awful in these woods. Please let me in. I need you." The urge to respond and look was nearly irresistible. But this time I was wiser. Whatever this was, it could imitate voices flawlessly. First the forest ranger, then Julia, before that a child. It was exploiting my desires, fears, and guilt to manipulate me. "James, please." Julia's voice broke with sorrow. "I still love you. I made a mistake and we can make things right." I remained silent, eyes closed, standing perfectly still inside the circle. Minutes turned into hours as the voices kept changing their tone and tactics. Julia begging, then furious, terrified and shouting for help. The child crying and blaming me for abandoning it to perish. The ranger warning about official repercussions. My parents, whom I had not spoken to in years, expressing their disappointment. Each voice revealed facts they should not have known, personal details and secrets that cut deeply. These entities had access to my memories, my regrets, and my most hidden shames. Finally, as the dawn began to break, as the voices faded away, I opened my eyes to see the tower unchanged, yet transformed. Every surface, walls, windows, and furniture was covered in scratches. Deep marks in the wood created patterns that strained my eyes when I tried to look directly at them. Some kind of distorted language that I could not understand, though my mind kept attempting to make sense of it. The door and windows stayed shut and unbroken. The salt lines remained untouched. The rules had shielded me once again. Completely drained, I dropped to my knees inside the circle. The cut on my palm had already stopped bleeding and was beginning to scab over. I was in desperate need of water, food, and rest, but fear kept me within the circle's protection. The manual instructed to stay until the attack was over. Had it finished, or were they just regrouping? While pondering this, the radio suddenly sparked to life. I tensed, expecting trickery, but the voice that spoke was the usual base operator. "Tower 19, this is base emergency. Check in, please respond immediately." I hesitated, recalling rule number 25 about compromised communications. Yet this was an emergency check-in, not the typical protocol. Maybe different rules applied. I crawled toward the circle's edge, stretching as far as possible without stepping out. I barely managed to grab the radio handset and pulled it back inside with me, the cord taut. "Tower 19 here," I said, my voice hoarse from hours of silence. Thank heavens. The operator sounded sincerely relieved. We lost contact with Tower 14. Last night there was complete radio silence, and protocol demands a check-in with neighboring towers whenever that occurs. Tower 14, the one I was not supposed to observe between 3:27 p.m. and 3:42 p.m. The tower where I had spotted the inhuman shape, the tower that haunted my nightmare. I cautiously inquired, "What happened?" The answer was vague. A ranger team was en route. Have you seen anything unusual that way? Smoke, light signals, anything at all? I considered the strange smoke I had witnessed taking the form of a woman and the scratches covering my tower from the terrifying night I had just survived. Rule number 5 forbids mentioning peculiar events over the radio unless explicitly asked. This was the 3rd time I was asked, and only the first instance of inquiry. Nothing unusual to report, I lied. Stay alert and inform us immediately if you observe anything, the operator instructed. This was extremely out of the ordinary. Tower 14 had never failed to check in before. Understood, I replied, struggling to keep my voice calm. Then the operator added, "One more thing. We are sending Ranger Hawkins to your position for a safety inspection. Expect him before noon." Ranger Mike Hawkins. Yes, the district supervisor. Standard procedure when a tower communication is lost. It could not be mere chance that whatever tried to enter my tower last night used that exact name. It either knew about the real Ranger Hawkins scheduled to arrive today or... I asked casually, "Can you describe Ranger Hawkins?" The operator's voice shifted subtly, becoming more guarded. "Just want to be sure." "Recognize him when he arrives," I said quickly, then paused. "He is tall, with dark hair, and usually wears the standard green uniform of the Forest Service. You will know him by his identification badge. All members carry proper identification." "Right, of course. Thank you." I placed the radio down as my mind raced. If a real Ranger Hawkins was coming, I needed to be ready. But what if this was another trick? What if whatever had attacked the tower had somehow infiltrated the base? I checked the manual for any rules regarding official visitors. Rule number 26 states if Forest Service personnel are expected, prepare the tower according to standard procedures, but maintain protective measures. Confirm identity through official channels and follow the method on page 32. Under no circumstances allow entry to anyone who fails verification, regardless of apparent authority. At least I had some direction now. I had to clean up the tower, conceal the protective circle, put away the manual and candles, and make everything look normal for an inspection. However, I planned to keep salt in my pocket and be ready to activate protections if necessary. When I finally stepped out of the circle, my legs almost gave out beneath me. I'd been standing for hours, and my muscles were screaming in protest. I limped to the sink and gulped down some water gratefully before setting about restoring order in the tower. I could not do anything about the scratches on walls and furniture. There were too many, and they were too deep. If asked, I would have to blame animal damage or vandals. Carefully, I swept up the salt, blood, and ash. I arranged the candles and tried to make the area look somewhat professional. Around 11:30 in the morning, I noticed a vehicle approaching. Through the binoculars, I saw a Forest Service truck climbing the access road. It stopped at the trailhead, and a tall figure dressed in green appeared, starting the climb up to the tower. I tensed up, ready for this to be either a genuine safety inspection or another attempt by the entities to get inside. Regardless, I would be prepared. As the figure came closer, I carefully examined him. He fit the description well, tall with dark hair, wearing a standard uniform. There was nothing evidently strange or otherworldly about him, but whatever came last night had sounded perfectly human at first as well. When he reached the tower, he called out, "Hello, Tower 19, Ranger Hawkins, District Supervisor, coming." I replied, gathering my verification tools. A special symbol to slip under the door, salt in my pocket, and a kitchen knife tucked into the back of my jeans just in case. I pressed my ear against the door. No odd breathing, no unnatural noises. "I need to see some identification," I said. "Please hold your badge up to the window." I heard shuffling, and moments later, a Forest Service badge appeared beside the door window. "Mike Hawkins, District Supervisor," he said, the photo matching the man outside. Still, I refused to take any risks and slipped the verification symbol under the door. "What is this?" he asked. his tone more curious than annoyed. "Standard verification procedure," I answered. "Manual. Ah, I understand." He sounded unsurprised. It had been quite some time since anyone had used this. "Give me a moment." A piece of paper slid back under my door with the proper response symbol sketched on it, a circle intersected by a vertical line. My heartbeat eased a bit. This seemed genuine, but I had one final check before opening the door. "I need to ask you 3 questions according to protocol." "Proceed," he said kindly. I repeated the same 3 questions as before. He answered the first 2 accurately, and for the last one he said, "I do not believe this tower has a specific call sign beyond its name as Tower 19. If it does, it must be in your orientation materials." That was an honest response, not the confident yet incorrect reply the entity had given earlier. I unlocked and opened the door, still holding the knife behind my back. Ranger Hawkins stepped inside and immediately wrinkled his nose. It smelled like something had died here. Then he asked, "What happened to the walls?" I tensed, but his reaction seemed genuinely human, showing surprise and concern at the tower's condition. I answered carefully, "I'm not sure. It happened last night. I think vandals may have been responsible." He traced one of the deep gouges with his fingers. "These are severe, and they are all over. This is purposeful damage to federal property." He turned to me, frowning. "Did you see who did this?" I shook my head. I'd been asleep, a weak excuse but better than the truth. He seemed doubtful but did not push further, and instead began a thorough examination of the tower. Inspecting systems and jotting down notes on a clipboard, he said, "We're here regarding Tower 14. There has been no contact since yesterday, which is quite unusual. You are the nearest tower, so I wanted to check if you have observed anything." This was the second time I was asked. One more, and according to rule number 5, I could share what I had seen, which was nothing specific. I replied cautiously. "Have you visited Tower 14 yet?" he asked, shaking his head. "Another group is on their way there now and should arrive around the same time I got here." Ranger Hawkins finished his inspection and made a last note. Except for the vandalism, everything appeared functional, but he had to report the damage because it was severe. They might send a team for further investigation. More people coming to the tower was the last thing I needed. "Is that really necessary?" I asked. "It does not affect my ability to complete the job." He looked at me strangely and said, "This is serious damage, Mr. Dawson, and honestly, your reaction to it is troubling. Most individuals would be more upset about something like this." I did not know how to react. I could not exactly tell him I had spent the night being terrorized by interdimensional creatures. "I will return tomorrow with some security cameras to install," he continued. "Meanwhile, keep your door locked and report any suspicious behavior immediately." I nodded, feeling relieved that at least he was leaving. As he was heading for the door, he stopped and turned back. "One more thing. Have you noticed anything strange about Tower 14? Lights, movement, anything at all?" That was the third request, and according to the 5th rule, I was now allowed to reveal what I had witnessed. Indeed, just a few days earlier, I had noticed something peculiar through the binoculars roughly at 3:30 in the afternoon. Hawkins suddenly became very still. "What exactly did you observe?" he inquired. I explained the distortion I saw around the tower and the eerie figure I had briefly caught sight of. As I spoke, Hawkins's demeanor shifted from professional curiosity to something nearing fear. "You mentioned 3:30, he asked, his voice strained. "Yes, precisely at that time," I confirmed. He appeared to reach a conclusion. "Mr. Dawson, I need to use your radio to get in touch with my team immediately." I indicated the radio device. He grabbed the handset and quickly started communicating through codes I did not understand. After a short conversation, he set the radio down with a grim expression. "My team arrived at Tower 14, he said. It is deserted, no trace of the watchman, but the tower itself. He paused. The tower itself has been changed. Changed in what way? I asked. The interior is covered with marks similar to those on your walls here, but far more extensive and complete, plus a symbol burned into the floor, a large circle with strange inscriptions resembling my protective circle, but larger. I must go there at once, Hawkins declared. You should come with me. It is too dangerous for you to remain here alone. Abandon the tower, break the rules that had kept me alive. This seemed like the absolute worst choice. I cannot leave my post, I responded firmly. It is against protocol. Hawkins stared at me with, It feels almost unfortunate that events are unfolding in these woods that go beyond your assigned duties. Mr. Dawson, the watchman from Tower 14, has vanished. Your tower was defaced with identical signs. This forms a clear pattern and indicates you might be the next target. This only strengthens the importance of adhering to the protocols I have emphasized. The guidelines in the manual have shielded me up to now, and I have no intention of abandoning them. Hawkins sighed deeply, then said, At least let me place someone here to assist you. I replied, That will not be necessary. I can manage. He clearly disagreed, but seemed to understand he could not compel me. I will return tomorrow with security gear. Keep your radio on. Should anything unusual occur, contact me immediately. I consented just to encourage his departure. As he descended the stairs, I overheard him mutter into a handheld radio, He's like the others, already too far gone. We will have to evacuate Tower 19 by force tomorrow. What was he implying by like the others? Did previous watchmen face similar experiences? Were the rules protecting me or pushing me toward the edge? As Ranger Hawkins's truck vanished down the trail, I revisited the manual. It contained no direct instruction about Forest Service workers wanting to remove me from the tower. The closest rule was number 3. Never leave the tower from sunset until sunrise. Since it was still day, my instincts screamed not to depart. The rules had preserved my life so far. I had to rely on them, though the seed of doubt had already been sown. What if they were wrong? The guidebook itself seemed to be part of the dilemma. What if obeying the instructions was exactly what the entities wanted? The radio crackled suddenly. Tower 19, respond. This was Ranger Hawkins. I grabbed the receiver. Tower 19 here. We have reached Tower 14. You need to see this. Can you use your binoculars to check Tower 14 right now? I glanced at the clock. 3:24 p.m., 3 minutes before the forbidden window. I could not comply. I answered, Not at this moment. This was an official request, Mr. Dawson. I was asked to verify what we were witnessing. I hesitated. Violating rule number 1 had triggered all this chaos. I could not repeat that mistake. I'm sorry. I will check back later. Tower 19 out, I said, setting down the receiver as Hawkins began to object. The radio suddenly came alive again. This is a direct command. Look at Tower 14 now. I muted the volume, my hands trembling. This had to be a test. The real Hawkins would not be aware of the 3:27 p.m. rule. It must have been the entity's attempt to trick me into breaking another guideline, another fault that could weaken the barrier even more. I sank heavily onto my cot, my head buried in my hands. I was caught in an impossible dilemma. If I obeyed the rules, Hawkins assumed I was beyond help and planned to forcibly remove me the next day. But if I disobeyed, I risked letting in whatever haunted the other side of the barrier. The manual lay next to me, its worn pages full of the rules that had guarded me, had kept me safe. I reached out and traced my fingers over the leather cover. Then suddenly, on impulse, I flipped it over and noticed a faint inscription burned onto the back cover in tiny letters that I had not seen before. It was a message stating that the rules were like chains and the violations represented the key. Tower 19 was mentioned as the doorway to whatever lay beyond. This mysterious note etched into the manual's back lingered in my mind as I wandered around the tower. What could it signify? Were the rules meant to defend me or trap me? Were the offenses dangerous or essential? And why was I chosen? Why Tower 19? Doubt gnawed at me as if it were something tangible. I had been carefully following every rule, viewing them as my lifeline, but what if I was mistaken? What if the true peril arose from obedience rather than rebellion? Desperately searching the desk drawer for any clues left behind by former guards, I found a small notebook buried beneath a pile of official Forest Service paperwork in the lowest drawer. Its cover was warped and water-stained. My hands trembled as I opened it to reveal densely packed, frantic handwriting scrawled all over the pages, at times overlapping, as though the author had been too rushed to start a new line. One entry read, June 17th, Day 5 at Tower 19, found the manual today. Rules seem strange but appear harmless, following them just to be safe. Another noted, June 20th. Strange noises at night, the rules work, whatever it is remains outside. And June 24th, accidentally broke rule number 16, saw something outside that should not exist. Julia's car. She has been gone for 3 years. I froze Julia, just like my former wife, but this was not my handwriting, and my Julia was clearly alive when I left on June 25th. Things are deteriorating, more activity, more noises, the regulations are harder to obey. Now so many precise timed actions. On June 27th, my second violation today, I fell asleep during the 419 ritual and woke up to find the inside of the tower scratched up. Something entered while I was asleep. I can sense it watching me. On June 30th, I cannot discern what is real anymore. Tower 14, constantly watching me. Always watching. A ranger came today and told me I must leave. But I cannot leave the rules. Forbid leaving after dark, and it is always dark now. Always dark. On July 3rd, the barrier is weakening. I glimpse them now and then in the corners of my vision, long limbs, too many joints, faces that shift and transform. They speak in familiar voices. They know things they should not know. On July 5th, 3 violations, now only 1 left. They grow stronger. Breaking through last night they almost entered, but the protective circle saved me. Yet it is fading. The symbols are less effective now. On July 8th, I comprehend the truth. The rules do not keep them out. They imprison us. We are already on their side of the barrier. Tower 19 is not merely a door. It is a cage, and I am the lure. The entries became more fragmented after this, deteriorating into wild, frantic notes about the space between worlds and thin places in reality. The last entry sent chills right through me. My veins have become part of the walls, the floor, and the ceiling, silently observing and waiting. I have come to believe that the only escape lies in going through the ultimate violation, breaking the final chain entirely, opening the door completely. Perhaps then I will comprehend. Perhaps then I will be free if such freedom exists. If anyone finds this, know that Tower 19 is not what it appears to be. The rules are the chains, not the safeguard. 4 violations lead to freedom. I promise to share what lies beyond. The entry ended there. No further pages, no conclusion, no explanation about the writer's fate. Just a vow of reporting from beyond that was clearly never fulfilled. I placed the notebook down, my hands trembling. The previous watchman had intentionally broken all 4 rules, believing it would liberate him, yet now he had vanished. Was that the same fate that befell Tower 14's watchman? Suddenly, the radio crackled, startling me. Tower 19, this is base with an emergency alert. The team at Tower 14 lost all contact. Ranger Hawkins is unresponsive. All lookouts must keep radio contact every hour, exactly on the hour. Do you copy? I grabbed the receiver and replied, Tower 19 copies. What happened at Tower 14 remains unclear. The last message mentioned discovering anomalies in the structure, then radio silence. A second team will be sent at first light tomorrow. Until that time, all lookouts are to secure their posts and maintain hourly radio transmissions. Understood, I responded, a dreadful suspicion settling in my mind. Has anyone heard from Ranger Hawkins at all? A pause followed. Negative. His most recent check-in came from your area approximately 3 hours ago. Right after he had departed my tower and headed towards Tower 14, he never actually reached it, or something occurred to him en route. When he finally arrived at Tower 19, our records show a Forest Service vehicle still stationed at the Tower 14 access point. Can you confirm this visually? I tensed because they wanted me to focus on Tower 14 again. Glancing at my watch, it was 6:17 p.m., well past the forbidden window from 3:27 to 3:42, so it should be safe now. I said I was going to check and move towards the binoculars. Swinging them in the direction of Tower 14, the metal structure sparkled under the evening sun, appearing perfectly normal. At its base, I could barely make out a green Forest Service truck. There was no movement, no indication of life. Confirmed, I reported the vehicle remained at the foot of Tower 14 with no visible activity. Copy that. Maintain hourly contact. Base out, came the reply. I lowered the binoculars, a creeping feeling of unease washing over me. If the real Ranger Hawkins had indeed gotten to Tower 14 and then vanished, what might have happened to him? More importantly, what had tried to deceive me into looking at Tower 14 during the forbidden time frame earlier? As the sun dipped lower, I began preparing for the night, methodically reviewing the rules for dusk. Rule number 12 instructed that, at sunset, I should place a yellow candle in each window and recite the evening protection verse from page 25. Pausing with the matchbox in my hand, the notebook's warning reverberated in my thoughts. The rules do not keep them out. The rules keep us safe. What if every single rule I obeyed only tightened my bonds to this place, binding me ever closer to whatever lay beyond the barrier? What if each ceremony only made these chains stronger instead of providing protection? Yet my own experiences told a different story. Whenever I adhered to the rules, I remained safe. The one occasion I defied a rule was when I glanced at Tower 14 during the forbidden time, and that is when the haunting began. I struck a match, igniting yellow candles, one for each window, while reciting the evening protection verse as instructed. It felt wiser to obey the rules and survive than to risk breaking them based on the incoherent warnings of a possibly deranged former watchman. As night fully descended, I took my place on the cot inside a freshly drawn protective circle with the manual and flashlight within arm's reach. Hourly radio check-ins sliced through the dark silence, each brief message offering a fleeting connection to the outside world, but failing to ease the overwhelming feeling of isolation. At the 11 o'clock p.m. check-in, the base operator's voice was tense. Tower 19, we've lost contact with Towers 11 and 23 as well. Evacuation procedures are starting for all lookouts in your sector. A helicopter will reach your position at first light. Pack only the essentials. Do you copy? I answered, I copy. Evacuation meant leaving the tower, which went against rule number 3. Never leave between sunset and sunrise, but the evacuation was planned for dawn. After sunrise, I would still be following the rules. I was told to be ready on the observation deck at 5:45 a.m. Bring no more than a single backpack. Tower 19, confirm these directions. Confirmed and prepared at 5:45 in the morning. Good, and Tower 19, remain safe tonight at base. The radio went silent, leaving me with a strong feeling that the operator intended to say more, but either could not or chose not to through the airwaves. Stay safe tonight, as if they suspected what might be approaching me. Around midnight, the temperature inside the tower dropped sharply. Frost appeared on the inner surfaces of the windows, despite the summer heat outside. The yellow candles by the windows flickered wildly before they extinguished themselves entirely. At the same moment, rule number 8 became clear. Rapid temperature shifts signal a weakening barrier. Light the blue candle and speak the incantation found on page 43. I located the blue candle, now just a small stub after many uses, and ignited it with fingers chilled to numbness by the cold. As I began the Latin chant, the candle's flame shifted to an unnatural purple hue, casting a ghostly glow over the frost-covered tower interior. When I finished the last words, instead of the temperature warming as it had before, the frost on the windows began to alter. Patterns emerged in the ice, not random crystals, but intentional shapes forming crude writing. They are not coming for you. They are coming for us. The door must open. The final violation. My breath caught in my throat as the entities began to communicate directly. They no longer depended on mimicked voices or trickery. They were demanding. I was about to break the ultimate rule to complete the 4 violations that would fully unlock whatever barrier the previous watchman had described. I whispered, "Who are you?" even though no rule allowed such direct communication. The frost shifted once more, shaping new words. We are the Watchers. We are the Waiting. We were here before, and we will remain long after. That revealed nothing. I asked, "What do you want?" Crossing another forbidden boundary by interacting with them, the frost designs changed even faster, now saying, "Freedom, return home." A dreadful realization started to form. If the former watchman's words were true, if Tower 19 was a prison rather than a gate, then these beings were not trying to invade from another realm. They were attempting to escape back to their world. And somehow, I was the key. My infractions were the trigger that would release them. But why me? Why at this moment? As if sensing my thoughts, the frost spelled out new words. You are hollow, empty vessel, perfect host. Hollow, empty vessel. Those words cut sharply. I had arrived here fleeing from my failures, my shattered marriage, my struggle with alcohol. Grief and guilt had hollowed me out long before I came to Tower 19. But perfect host for what? Before I could ponder this more, a fresh sound shattered the quiet, crackling static from the radio, though I had not turned it on. Through the noise came a voice I instantly recognized as Ranger Hawkins. Tower 19 emergency transmission. If you can hear this, do not repeat. Do not allow. The evacuation team was scheduled to arrive tomorrow, but it was not a genuine evacuation. The base had been compromised. The entities had dissolved the transmission into static and then returned even weaker, using our shapes and our voices. The rules were our only safeguard, and breaking them was exactly what they wanted. I stayed in the tower and followed them. The static grew louder, then suddenly stopped. Was this the true Hawkins? Perhaps it was broadcasting a warning, or maybe another trick. The frost writing hinted the entities wanted me to break the rules, yet the previous watchman's journal suggested the opposite, that obeying the rules was trapping me. Who could I rely on? The voice on the radio, the frost inscriptions, the manual's guidelines, or the ramblings of a vanished watchman? As I struggled with these doubts, a sudden insight struck me. The base operator had said to prepare for evacuation at 5:45 in the morning. Sunrise at this latitude in July occurred at about 5:30. I would be breaking rule number 3 only if I left before sunrise. 15 minutes after sunrise should be safe unless that was exactly their plan. Maybe the real evacuation order would arrive before sunset, forcing me to choose between violating that rule and losing my chance to escape. My head ached with confusion and exhaustion. I had not slept properly for days, and constant alertness was wearing me down. I had to think clearly to discern reality from deceit. I checked the clock. 1:17 in the morning. Several hours still remained. Until dawn approached, the supposed hours for evacuation arrived, leaving me uncertain about what action to take. The frost that had covered the windows had melted away, erasing any hint of the mysterious messages once visible. The blue candle continued to burn steadily, its flame now restored to a usual blue shade. The tower was beginning to warm up again. I opened the manual and reviewed the rules carefully, paying close attention to rule number 4. This was the one directive I had not yet encountered or mentioned. Never destroy this manual or attempt to change the rules, since doing so results in immediate and irreversible consequences. I wondered if the key might lie not in obeying or breaking these rules, but in rejecting the whole system by destroying the manual itself. However, that would count as the 4th violation. According to the previous watchman, that breach would completely remove the barrier between worlds. If the Frost messages were truthful, that outcome was precisely what the entities desired. I found myself trapped in a double bind. Obeying the rules might imprison me in a cosmic cage, forcing me to act as a host or bait, whereas breaking them could unleash whatever sought to cross over from the other side. Lost in this impossible dilemma, I suddenly heard a new sound. It was a gentle, rhythmic tapping coming from the trap door, unlike the violent pounding heard the night before. The tapping felt soft and almost hesitant. I moved closer with caution. The tapping continued and clearly came from beneath the floor. "Who is there?" I called out, throwing caution aside. The tapping abruptly ceased. Then, faintly, almost whispering, a voice spoke. "James, it's me," said a man. A voice I did not recognize asked who I was. I demanded to know. "I am the former watchman," it replied. "I am trapped in the in-between." When it mentioned my notebook, a chill ran down my spine. "How do you know about that?" I questioned. "I can see fragments, pieces of the tower through you. The barrier here is fragile." I asked what had happened to this person while keeping my distance from the trap. I broke all 4 rules. I thought breaking them would liberate me, but instead it ensnared me here, neither fully in one place nor the other. There was a long pause. The voice explained that Tower 19 exists on a thin boundary between realities. Creatures on the other side are eager to cross over. The rules are meant to keep the barrier whole. Violating them weakens this protection. This contradicted what my notebook and the Frost messages had said. "But your notebook claimed the rules were chains, not safeguards," I argued. "I was mistaken," the voice admitted, pain evident in every word. "They misled me, manipulated my thoughts, making me believe that breaking the rules would release me from their control. Instead, it only empowered them. Do not repeat my error, James." I wanted to trust him since his words matched my own experiences. The rules had kept me safe so far, but doubt remained. Could this be another deception? If you are truly the previous watchman, prove it. Tell me something only you would know. After another pause, he said, "My name is Daniel Weiss. I came to Tower 19 after my wife Julia died in a car crash. I was fleeing from my sorrow, just as you are running away from your broken marriage. We are alike, you and I, and that is why they selected us." Both Julia and his wife shared the same name, Julia Tharpool. The coincidence seemed too striking. The voice continued, "They are using details from my notebook to deceive you. They understand your vulnerabilities because they understood mine. Do not trust anything they present to you." I asked about the evacuation scheduled for tomorrow, uncertain if it was genuine. The voice replied, "I am unsure. The entities can influence the outside world somewhat, especially as the barrier grows weaker, but they cannot fully appear there yet. That is why they need you." Desperation crept into my voice as I inquired about what I should do next. The voice instructed, "Follow all the rules precisely as written. The manual is meant to protect you, not to confine you. Above all, do not break the 4th rule. Do not destroy the manual. That is what they desire the most." The tapping restarted, now growing faint as my connection weakened. The in-between is shifting. Remember, James, 3 violations are dangerous, but 4 are deadly. You have already broken 1 rule, so do not break any more. Then the tapping ceased completely. I stood there, staring at the trap, my mind full of conflicting ideas. The previous watchman, if he truly was him, claimed the entities wished for rule-breaking, yet his own notebook stated otherwise. The first messages had urged me to break the rules, but Ranger Hawkins's transmission warned me to obey them. What was the truth? I returned to my cot, clutching the manual tightly to my chest, watching the hours pass in silence. The tower remained quiet. Throughout the rest of the night, the only sounds were the typical creaking of wooden beams and the faint calls of nighttime creatures. At 4:30 in the morning, as the first light of dawn began to lighten the sky, the radio crackled to life for the regular hourly check-in. Tower 19, this is base. The evacuation helicopter is en route with an estimated arrival at 5:45 a.m., as scheduled. Are you prepared to evacuate? Ready and waiting, I replied, still unsure if I was making the right decision. Good. When the helicopter arrives, proceed immediately to the landing zone. Do not hesitate and do not return to the tower for any reason. Is that clear? Understood. The pilot will provide a code word for final confirmation before boarding. The code word is threshold. Acknowledged receipt of the code word. Confirmed, the code word is threshold. Excellent. This will be our final radio communication. Move to the observation deck at 5:30 a.m. and await visual confirmation of the helicopter. Base out. I packed my few essentials into my backpack. Fresh clothes, toiletries, the manual which I was reluctant to leave, and the previous watchman's notebook. Everything else stayed behind. As 5:30 a.m. drew near, the sky brightened with the approaching sunrise. I glanced at my watch repeatedly, unwilling to step onto the observation deck even a minute before dawn. At exactly 5:33 a.m., I opened the door to the observation deck and stepped out. The morning air was crisp and clear, while the forest below lay wrapped in early mist. In the distance, I could just make out the shapes of the trees. Tower 14 appeared completely normal in the early morning light as I scanned the sky for the helicopter, yet saw nothing. My watch indicated 5:37 a.m. It was expected any moment. Suddenly, a movement near the base of my tower caught my attention. Looking down, I noticed a figure stepping out from the trees wearing the typical green uniform of a ranger. Despite the distance, I instantly recognized Ranger Hawkins. He waved up at me, cupping his hands around his mouth, and shouted, "Dawson, do not trust the helicopter. It is them come down here now." I froze in place. If this was truly Hawkins, the same one who had reportedly vanished at Tower 14, how had he arrived here, and why was he telling me to come down instead of waiting for evacuation? But if it was not Hawkins, if it was one of those things pretending to be him, then why would they want me to leave the tower? The former watchman, or whoever had impersonated him before, instructed me to follow the rules and remain inside the tower. Hawkins kept shouting, "The entities have taken over the base. The evacuation is a trap. I have a vehicle waiting not far away." I then heard the unmistakable rhythmic beating of helicopter rotors approaching. The evacuation team was arriving. I had only moments to decide whether to trust Hawkins and climb down to him, stay put and wait for the helicopter, or retreat further inside the tower, refusing both options. The rotor noise increased as a black speck emerged on the horizon, growing rapidly larger. The helicopter was nearly upon me. Hawkins grew more desperate, telling me, "They are here, get down now," as the helicopter came closer, revealing every detail. A standard Forest Service rescue helicopter came into view, nothing out of the ordinary about it. I'd already made up my mind the protocols had kept me safe so far. They were the only unwavering elements in this nightmare. I decided to trust the rules, one final time. I stepped back inside the tower and firmly shut the door, locking it securely. Watching through the window, I saw the helicopter circle, once before beginning its descent toward the small clearing next to the tower used for emergency landings. Hawkins, down below, was waving his arms frantically, his movements growing more erratic as the helicopter touched down. He then stepped backwards into the trees and vanished from sight. From the helicopter came two figures dressed in Forest Service uniforms, a man and a woman, each carrying standard gear. They approached the base of the tower, looking up to the observation deck where I had stood just moments ago. The woman lifted a megaphone and announced, "James Dawson, this is the evacuation team. Please come down immediately. We need to evacuate the area." I stayed silent by the window, not moving to respond. The woman continued firmly, "Mr. Dawson, this evacuation is compulsory. The forest is compromised and several lookouts are missing. Come down now." I still held back, observing for any proof to confirm or reject their authenticity. The man with her keyed a radio and then faced the tower again. Taking the megaphone, he called loudly, "Mr. Dawson, code word threshold. Please verify and descend immediately." This was the correct code word, which implied they. The warnings had seemed credible, yet previous watchmen had cautioned me never to trust anything influenced by those entities. As I hesitated, a movement caught my attention at the perimeter of the clearing. Ranger Hawkins, or someone remarkably like him, was stepping out from the forest once again, but something felt off. His motions appeared jerky and disjointed, and his proportions seemed distorted, as if his limbs were unnaturally elongated compared to his torso. The evacuation team noticed him too. The woman instinctively reached for her sidearm while the man urgently spoke into his radio. "Ranger Hawkins," the woman called out, her voice clear in the crisp morning air. "Is that you, Hawkins?" There was no reply. He kept advancing toward them with that unsettling, irregular gait. "Sir, please identify yourself," the woman demanded once more, now drawing her weapon. Hawkins halted roughly 6 meters away. Then, in a movement too swift to perceive properly, he seemed to unravel his form, his elongated limbs stretching to unimaginable lengths, and his head distorting grotesquely. What stood before them was no longer human, but a towering, spindly creature with multiple joints and a face twisted into a distorted mimicry of human features. The woman fired her weapon, the shots ringing out across the clearing, but the creature formerly known as Hawkins did not fall. Instead, it lunged forward with blinding swiftness. What followed was a blur of chaos too fast to fully grasp. The evacuation team fired continuously as they retreated toward their helicopter. The creature moved with incredible speed, its limbs bending and twisting in a way that seemed impossible. Screams and gunshots filled the air, followed by the roar of a helicopter engine starting. And then suddenly, everything went silent. The clearing below was completely empty. No rescue team, no sign of the Hawkins creature, no helicopter. Just a peaceful morning mist floating among the trees. Had I imagined everything? Was it merely a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress? Yet at the edge of the clearing, something shifted. A figure stepped out from the tree line. It was Ranger Hawkins, once again looking entirely normal. He raised his hand in greeting, then pointed to the tower door, signaling me to come down behind him. More figures appeared from the forest, the evacuation team all seemingly unharmed and ordinary. The helicopter rested quietly in the clearing, its rotors still as if it had been there peacefully the whole time. Had I fabricated the attack or the transformation? I knew deep down that was not the case. This was another trick, another ploy meant to draw me outside. I pulled back further into the tower. My mind made up I would not leave. I would follow the rules and wait. What I did not know was exactly what I was waiting for. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life. Unexpectedly. "Tower 19. Tower 19. Please respond." The voice was unfamiliar. Unlike the usual base operator, it was higher-pitched and carried a sense of urgency. I moved cautiously, but stayed silent. James Dawson, if you can hear this, remain in the tower. Do not leave with the evacuation team. I repeat, do not. Evacuating the team outside is not what the genuine evacuation was planned for tomorrow. Please confirm if you receive this message. I stayed silent, observing through the window as the figures outside talked among themselves, occasionally looking up at the tower. They appeared completely normal now, showing no signs of the terrifying change I had witnessed earlier. The radio continued its message. This is Dr. Eleanor Reed from the Department of Paranormal Research. We have been observing the situation at Black Ridge Forest. Tower 19 is positioned at a crossroads between dimensions. Beings from the other side have attempted to break through for many years. The guidelines in your manual are containment procedures made to maintain the barrier's stability. This matched what the voice beneath the trapdoor had told me, that the rules were meant for protection and not imprisonment. James, please respond if you can hear me. We need to confirm you are still following the protocols. I hesitated, then picked up the receiver. This is Tower 19, I hear you. I'm still inside the tower. A sigh of relief came through the radio. Thank goodness. Listen carefully. The entities have been growing stronger. They have already broken into several towers, 14, 11, and 23. The watchmen disobeyed the rules, all 4 of them, which weakened the barriers at those sites. What do they want? I asked, watching as the figures outside started moving toward the tower's base to cross fully into our world. They have been trapped in a pocket. For centuries, this dimension has only been able to partially manifest during particular moments and under very specific circumstances. The towers were erected as containment units, each watchman rigorously trained to adhere to protocols designed to uphold the barriers. However, I was not properly trained. I protested, but they merely handed me a manual. That was a critical error, since budget cuts had reduced the training sessions. The manual was intended to be paired with hands-on guidance. How many rules have you already broken? They asked. Just 1, I admitted, glancing at Tower 14 during the Forbidden Time window. That's acceptable. Still manageable, they replied. A single violation slightly weakens the barrier, but does not rupture it. Yet the danger magnifies dramatically with every additional breach. 4 infractions break it thoroughly. Outside the Hawkins figure, the evacuation team reached the tower's base. I could hear them start ascending the stairs. They're attempting to enter, I said urgently. The entities appeared like a ranger in the evacuation squad. Dr. Reed ordered, draw a protective circle using the symbols from page 86 in the manual. Quickly, I grabbed the manual and flipped to that page. Spotting the intricate symbol that I had used during the prior assault, I combined salt and ash. Without any fresh blood to include, I began tracing the circle on the floor as fast as possible. The footsteps on the stairs echoed louder. A key clinked in the lock. They had a key. How was that even possible? Hurry, James, Dr. Reed urged with urgency. The circle was complete, and they could not step over it, but I had to finish it before they got inside. The door handle turned, and I hurriedly finished the last symbols of the circle just as the door swung wide. Ranger Hawkins appeared in the doorway looking entirely normal. Behind him, the evacuation team stood, also seeming fully human. Mr. Dawson, Hawkins said calmly, it is time to leave. The helicopter is waiting. I remained inside my circle, heart racing. You are not Ranger Hawkins. His expression remained unchanged. Of course I am. You met me yesterday. I carried out the safety inspection. Now gather your belongings. We must leave at once. The actual evacuation is tomorrow, I replied. You are not human. A flicker of irritation and anger crossed his face, but was quickly hidden. Mr. Dawson, you are clearly suffering from paranoia caused by isolation. This is a frequent problem among fire lookouts. Please come with us. Medical staff are ready. His explanation seemed reasonable. Was I paranoid? Was Dr. Reed another illusion or trick? James, do not listen to them. Dr. Reed's voice crackled over the radio. Stay inside the circle. They cannot cross it. Hawkins shifted his gaze to the radio, his face hardening. Turn that off, Mr. Dawson. Base communications have been compromised. He took a step forward, then abruptly stopped as if hitting an invisible barrier. His eyes dropped to the circle on the floor and his face twisted in frustration. Clever, he said quietly. The situation was getting more intense and complex, but I wondered how long anyone could really survive inside that place. Hours, days, or even weeks sounded impossible since you eventually need to eat, sleep, and use the restroom. Then, what happens when you finally step outside the circle? The woman standing behind him smiled, but her expression was unnaturally wide. We will be waiting, she said calmly. We have endless patience, Julia Dawson. We have already waited for centuries. We can wait a little longer. What do you want from me? I demanded, my voice steady. Hawkins replied softly, almost with kindness. Just one more violation, then another, and after that, you will be free. We will all be free. Suddenly, Dr. Reed warned me urgently. Do not listen to them, Julia. They are lying. If you break all 4 rules, the barrier will collapse entirely. They will cross over into our world fully. The woman tilted her head unnaturally to one side as if mocking and asked, What would be so wrong with that? We were here before you. This was our world until we were trapped and banished into the space in between. We simply wished to return home. They were banished for a reason, Dr. Reed insisted strongly. They feed on human consciousness and emotions. If left unchecked, they would destroy humanity from within. For a fleeting moment, Hawkins's form shifted, revealing something alien underneath. Too many limbs and eyes. Something terrifying. Then his voice returned to normal. Such dramatic words. We offer enlightenment, not destruction. The guards who came before you understood this. They welcomed us. I thought about the previous watchers trapped in the void, caught between worlds, neither here nor there. Is that the truth they want us to accept? The freedom you offer caused a shadow to cross Hawkins's face. Change can be challenging for some, yet it remains essential. The first one has to clear the path for everyone else. The door needs to be opened completely before we can all come back. I'm supposed to be the doorman, I asked with a hint of bitterness. You are far more than that, the woman replied. You are the key, the empty vessel, the ideal host for the first to fully pass through. Not merely a doorman, but a host body for whatever entity wishes to enter first. What becomes of me in this arrangement? I inquired, already suspecting the reply. Hawkins smiled and explained that you would become part of something greater. Your consciousness would merge with ours. Your memories, experiences, and emotions would continue to exist within the collective. In other words, I cease to be, I said plainly. Individual existence is overvalued, the woman responded. It is so lonely, so confined. Would you not prefer to belong to something immense, eternal, and magnificent? James, do not engage with them, Dr. Reed warned. They are tricksters, experts in deceit. Stay within the circle and wait for the genuine evacuation tomorrow. Hawkins's patience appeared to be dwindling. His figure flickered more noticeably this time. Enough of these games. The barrier is already weakening. You have broken one rule. Break the next 2 and we can assist you with the 4th. Resist and we will find another path. He turned to depart but said, We will be waiting, James, when you are ready to accept your destiny. Break the 2nd rule, and we will know. The 3 figures withdrew, shutting the way behind them. As the door closed behind them, I heard footsteps descending the stairs and then silence followed. Are they gone? Dr. Dawson asked. I moved carefully to the window, making sure not to disrupt the protective circle, and peered outside. The clearing was empty. No helicopter, no figures in sight, not even Ranger Hawkins' truck remained. They have left, at least for now, I confirmed. Good, Dr. Dawson replied. Listen carefully, James. The actual evacuation team will arrive tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. This will be a comprehensive tactical team, including experts in paranormal containment. Until then, you must obey every rule in the manual to the letter. No further violations are allowed. The barrier must last for just one more day. I glanced down at the symbol beneath my feet that shielded me. How long can this circle be sustained? I asked. At most 24 hours, came the reply. It has to be renewed after that, but it should hold until the team arrives. They will know precisely how to repair the damage. There was a longer pause this time. The containment has been breached at several locations. Tower 19 is the linchpin. If we can maintain the barrier there is hope to restore all others. I sensed she was avoiding my direct question, which made me uneasy. What are you not telling me? The doctor let out a deep breath as he spoke through the radio. The entities have grown stronger than ever before. The barriers at towers 14, 11, and 23 have completely failed. Conventional containment methods might no longer be effective. The team arriving tomorrow may have to apply more extreme measures. I asked cautiously, what kind of extreme measures? For a moment, the pause stretched uncomfortably. I feared she might not respond. Tower 19 was designed both as a containment facility and a safety backup. If the barrier cannot be restored, the entire site may need to be neutralized. Neutralized, I repeated in disbelief. You mean demolished with me inside? That is truly a last resort, she quickly reassured me. We do have alternative methods to attempt first, but you must be ready for every possible outcome. I chuckled bitterly. So my options are to either become a host for interdimensional entities or be blown up with the tower. Fantastic. I'm sorry, James, she said sincerely, but the stakes are unimaginably high. Should the entities break through completely, the repercussions would be catastrophic worldwide. I exhaled deeply, trying to absorb everything. Very well, I agreed. I will follow the rules and hold out until tomorrow. But I want your promise that the evacuation team will do everything to bring me out alive. You have my word, she stated firmly. I will be with them personally. Now, I must coordinate with the team. Keep this channel open, but I might be silent at times. Remember to follow every protocol exactly. No exceptions. As the radio went quiet, I sank down inside my protective circle, completely drained. Suddenly, the manual appeared beside me, its worn cover seeming to taunt me with its simplicity. Just a book of instructions standing between me and total destruction or possession by beings from another realm. What a disaster I had walked into. All I desired was to escape my failed marriage and find a quiet job in the wilderness to fix my life. Instead, I had stepped right into a nightmare of cosmic terror. I glanced at my watch. 6:45 in the morning. Over 27 hours left until the official rescue team would arrive. 27 hours of strictly following instructions, avoiding any mistakes, and hoping the barrier held firm. Only now did I grasp what was truly unfolding. The rules were not chains meant to imprison me. Rather, they were protocols preserving the barrier between dimensions. Tower 19 was no prison. It was a stronghold against something desperate to break through from the other side. I was the unintentional guardian of that gate, chosen not for any special trait, but because I was hollow, empty enough to serve as a vessel for whatever sought entry. As the morning light grew stronger, I began preparing for the long wait ahead. I needed provisions, water, and rest, all while maintaining the protective circle and obeying every precise instruction in the manual. 27 hours. I could survive this. I had to. The hours dragged on with agonizing slowness. I remained inside the circle, carefully following each rule as its moment approached. At noon, I was meticulously adjusting the compass. I counted the clouds before the sunset and placed offerings on the windowsills for every task that required me to step outside the circle. I moved with careful caution, finishing the ritual as swiftly as possible to return to safety. Julia checked in regularly. Her voice was a comforting reminder that I was not entirely alone in this nightmare. She informed me that the evacuation team was assembling. Specialists in paranormal containment, armed with tools designed to stabilize the barrier, would arrive at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I just had to endure until then. As the afternoon slipped into evening, the tower's atmosphere shifted. The air became heavy, pressing against my skin like a tangible weight. The shadows in the corners looked denser, almost having substance and size instead of just being empty. Dark spots. Rule number 18 stated if shadows acted strangely, I should light all candles immediately and remain silent until the shadows returned to normal. I lit every candle I had, casting a warm glow around the tower that pushed back the growing darkness. In the stillness, I watched the shadows retreat to their rightful places, turning once again into mere silhouettes created by candlelight. The silence was overwhelming. No birds sang outside, no insects buzzed, and the usual creaks of the tower were gone. It felt as though the entire forest was holding its breath. At exactly 7:43 in the evening, as the sun vanished beneath the horizon, the radio suddenly sparked to life with Dr. Reed's tense voice. "Julia, are you there?" I grabbed the receiver and replied, "I'm still here, following the rules." "Listen carefully. There has been a development. The entities are becoming more active. We are noticing an increase in strange disturbances near towers 14, 11, and 23. Energy readings are soaring. Whatever is attempting to get through is gaining power. What does that mean for me? It means they might attempt something more direct. The protective circle should hold, but you must be ready for anything. They will use every trick to make you break a rule." As if her words had summoned them, a distant howl echoed in the forest. It was not a wolf or a coyote, but something that made my skin crawl. One howl was followed by another, then another, until a haunting chorus of eerie wails surrounded the tower. "Do you hear that?" I asked Dr. Reed. "I hear it, James." "What is happening? Howling everywhere around the tower. It does not sound like any creature I have ever heard before." She paused for a moment. "There is nothing in the rules about howling. This could be a new tactic. Stay alert." The howls grew louder, more intense, then suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was even more unnerving. Suddenly, a sharp crack came from directly beneath the tower, like something heavy striking the support beams, then another and another, steady, powerful blows that shook the entire structure. "They are trying to bring down the tower," I said with a cold certainty. A restless feeling settled in my stomach, but Dr. Dawson responded with certainty. "The towers are protected by more than just physical components. The same barriers that repel intruders also reinforce the buildings themselves." Suddenly, another series of strikes shook the tower, more forceful than before dust slowly drifted from the ceiling. I quietly remarked, "It genuinely feels like progress is being made. Remain inside the circle. Obey the rules. The barrier will withstand it." The attacks on the tower went on for nearly 1 hour. Fierce blows seemed to come from every direction, simultaneously. Each time the tower trembled, yet held firm. Eventually the assault diminished, the hits less frequent and weaker until they ceased altogether. I exhaled deeply, realizing I had been holding my breath. "I believe they have given up for now." Dr. Dawson warned they are probing the defenses, searching for weak spots. This is only the beginning. She was correct. As night advanced, the entities tried different tactics. The temperature swayed erratically, freezing cold one moment, stifling heat the next. The radio emitted strange signals that made my teeth throb and my vision blur. Soft whispers arose from the walls, too quiet to catch clear words, but persistent enough to wear down my nerves. Around midnight, I started noticing things out of the corner of my eye. Moving shadows, stretching limbs, faces forming and disappearing within the wooden grain. Each time I glanced their way, they vanished. At first, there was nothing there, but the instant my focus shifted, they appeared again. Rule number 21 warns that if you catch movement in your peripheral vision after midnight, never look directly at it. Instead, keep your eyes fixed on the manual until sunrise. I opened the manual and concentrated on its pages, battling the overwhelming urge to glance at the shapes now drifting freely at the edges of my sight. They grew bolder and larger, inching closer to my protective circle. My eyes ached from the strain of holding steady on the manual, and my neck throbbed with the effort of not turning. The peripheral shapes became clearer, tall figures with impossibly thin limbs and bulbous heads, moving with a jerky, unsettling grace. "They are in the tower," I whispered to Dr. Reed, my gaze still glued to the manual. "I can see them." Rule 21 advises against looking directly at them. "Good. Keep adhering to that rule," he said. "Direct observation can strengthen their hold on our reality. As long as you refuse to fully acknowledge them, they cannot manifest completely." The hours passed in agonizing slowness. The entities circled my protective barrier, occasionally reaching toward it with limbs that stretched and shortened at will. I sensed their growing frustration as their movements became more erratic and hostile. Then, at exactly 3:17 in the morning, the exact time I'd heard knocking from the trapdoor nights before, every candle in the tower was suddenly snuffed out at once. Darkness surrounded me, broken only by a faint glow of moonlight filtering through the windows. Rule number 13 states if all sources of light fail at once, remain completely still and recite your full name backward 3 times. Battling the rising panic, I stood rooted to the spot, my eyes locked on the now invisible manual. "Stonia Siege," I whispered quietly. The darkness seemed to pulse, alive and breathing. Then slowly, the candles reignited one by one, their flames flickering with a strange steadiness and a bluish tint. In their eerie light, I noticed the entities had withdrawn to the far corners of the tower. Visible only in my peripheral vision, they appeared softer now, watching and waiting. "They're becoming desperate," Dr. Reed mentioned when I explained what had occurred. "The fact that their attempts have turned more direct means the barrier is still holding. Keep going, James. Just a few more hours until dawn." Yet as time passed, the entities adopted a new tactic, one far more cunning than physical assaults or visible apparitions. A voice called gently, Julia's voice, coming from right behind me. "James, I must tell you something important." I refused to turn and kept staring at the manual, reminding myself of rule number 21. "You're not Julia." "No, I'm not," the voice confessed with a subtle shift. "But I hold information you need about the rules, about what is truly happening." Firmly, I responded, "I'm not interested." Ignoring my refusal, the voice continued, "The evacuation team is not coming to save you. They are coming to eliminate. You are as much a burden as you are an advantage now that you broke the initial rule." At that moment, they saw you as compromised. Although I was determined, doubt began to creep in. Dr. Reed had mentioned that neutralizing the site was a last option. What if the voice was telling the truth? "Consider this," the voice insisted. "They constructed these towers fully aware of the consequences. They placed unsuspecting watchmen here to sustain the barriers, never revealing the truth until it was too late. To them, you are disposable, just a part of their containment apparatus." "Be quiet," I whispered, but the doubt had already taken root. "There is another path," the voice said softly and convincingly. "Break the following rule intentionally, then the one after that. When the barrier becomes weak enough, we can reveal the truth to you, show you what exists beyond. It is not what you have been told. It is freedom, a power and understanding beyond anything you have imagined." "Why should I trust you?" "Because we have observed you your whole life, James Reynolds. We understand how your father diminished you, how your mother failed to defend you, how Julia abandoned you when times grew tough, just like everyone else did in your life. We know the real reason behind your job loss, the error that resulted in 3 people losing their lives, the mistake you have been hiding from. Nobody was aware of that. I'd covered it up, blaming equipment failure rather than admitting to my negligence. The lawsuit was settled quietly, the documents sealed. We know everything about you, the voice went on, your fears and your hopes. Your deepest shame matters, and we do not condemn you for any of it. We provide acceptance, understanding, and the opportunity to become part of something larger than yourself. I shut my eyes tightly, trying to silence the voice. Dr. Reed, I spoke into the radio. They are attempting to invade my mind. They possess knowledge. They should not have static, was my only reply. The radio fell silent. They have left you. The voice whispered nearer now like everyone else. But we never have. We have always waited for you. You belong with us, James. You always did. I murmured. No, yet my certainty was faltering. Look at me. The voice insisted, just once. Defy the rule. Witness the reality for yourself. The temptation was enormous. What if all I had been told was false? What if Dr. Reed and her team were the genuine menace? What if these beings truly offered empathy and acceptance instead of destruction and consumption? My neck stiffened, preparing to look up. My eyes slowly rose from the manual. A single glance. One breach, what damage could it cause? Then I recalled the prior Watchman's Journal. I violated all 4 commandments. I believed it would liberate me, but it did not. It confined me here, in the limbo, neither here nor there. He had been deceived, just as I am being deceived. Now convinced that breaking the rules would grant liberty and not captivity, these entities excel at deception, exploiting personal truths against me. No, I declared firmly, compelling my mind to resist. My eyes returned to the manual. I will not violate another rule, the voice hissed with frustration. Dropping any illusion of being Julia Fool, you think you have a choice. The barrier weakens hour by hour, with or without your cooperation. We will break through, and when we do, your torment will be unforgettable. Until that moment, you remain trapped on that side, I replied, gathering strength and defiance, so I advise you to get comfortable. A scream of fury shook the windows, not a human sound, but something ancient and dreadful. The temperature dropped rapidly, frost spreading over every surface. The protective circle surrounding me glowed for a moment, pushing back the cold, then just as suddenly as it had started, the attack ended. The temperature returned to normal, the presence became less noticeable, and the suffocating mood eased. Somewhat dawn was nearing. I'd survived the night. Dr. Reed's voice crackled through the radio static, but was clear enough. James, are you there? We lost contact for several hours. I'm here, I answered, a wave of relief washing over me. They tried all they could to make me break another rule. They knew things, intimate things, no one should know. They are telepathic to some extent. She said they can reach surface memories, emotional wounds, personal secrets. It is one of their most effective weapons. Well, it almost worked, I confessed, but I kept obeying the rules. Outstanding. The evacuation team is on schedule. Just a few more hours. How are you managing? Exhausted, famished, and parched, yet still intact. I tried to rest whenever possible. The protective circle would keep me safe. I had to stay in touch with the team, but I planned to check in every hour. As the first light of dawn gently streamed through the windows, the entities that had plagued me throughout the night finally withdrew entirely. The tower seemed somehow lighter, the atmosphere clearer. I stayed within my protective circle, but allowed myself to slump against the wall, my eyes closing from fatigue. I must have nodded off because suddenly I was jolted awake by the crackling sound of the radio. An urgent announcement came through. Attention all Forest Service personnel. This is an emergency bulletin. An unfamiliar voice declared severe fire danger in Black Ridge National Forest. All personnel are ordered to evacuate immediately. I repeat, all personnel evacuate immediately. I glanced at my watch. It was 8:17 in the morning. The evacuation team was not due for nearly 2 more hours. "Doctor, Sir Reed," I called into the radio. "Doctor. Reed, are you there?" No answer came, only the repeated urgent message. Through the windows, I noticed smoke beginning to rise in the direction of Tower 14. Real smoke this time, not the unnatural kind I had witnessed before. The forest was ablaze. I scanned the horizon frantically. The smoke spread rapidly, driven by winds that had not been there earlier. Several fire fronts were forming a circle around my tower. Was this truly happening, or just another trick by the entities? The timing seemed suspiciously perfect, coming just hours before the evacuation team was expected. I consulted the manual for any instructions. Regarding fires or evacuations, there was no clear information, but rule number 3 came to mind. Never leave the tower from sunset until sunrise. It was already past sunrise, so technically I could leave without breaking that rule. Yet what about the protective circle? It was my sole safeguard against the entities. If I left it to evacuate, I would be vulnerable. The smoke was growing denser, becoming visible even from afar. If this was a genuine fire, I did not have much time. Fires in dry forests can spread with terrifying speed, and the drought had left Black Ridge as dry as tinder. What if this was the entity's last move? Creating the illusion of a forest fire to drive me out of the tower, away from the protective rules and rituals that had kept me safe. However, if it was real, staying meant certain death. The radio crackled again. "Tower 19, this is Fire Command. Evacuate immediately. Fire is closing in from all directions. You have minutes, not hours. Still no news from Dr. Reed. No way to confirm if this was real or another trick." I moved to the window, straining to see through the smoke in the distance. I could just make out the orange glow of actual flames now devouring the drought-parched trees with eager efficiency. The heat was starting to be felt, even inside the tower. This seemed too detailed to be an illusion. I could sense the temperature-climbing smell. The smoke beginning to seep through the windows, the floor beneath my feet warming. Fire was nearing the base of the tower. I faced a difficult choice: remain inside and risk being burned alive, or venture outside, possibly falling into the entity's trap. Suddenly, the radio crackled back to life with Dr. Reed's voice. "James, the fire is real. The entities have somehow manipulated natural forces and started a forest blaze to flush you out. The evacuation team is rerouting, but they will not arrive before the flames catch up to you. You have to get out immediately." I hesitated because the manual's primary rule stressed survival, but she interjected urgently. "The manual is meant for containment during normal situations, but this is far from normal. If you perish inside the tower, the barrier loses its human element and it will collapse entirely." The term human element puzzled me, yet there was no time to ponder as thick smoke began pouring into the tower, drifting northeastward. Dr. Reed went on explaining that a river lay approximately 2 miles from my location, and the fire had not crossed it yet. The rescue team would meet me there. Hastily, I grabbed my essentials, the manual, the previous watchman's notes water, and my knife, stuffing them into my bag. The smoke thickened, stinging my eyes and burning my lungs as I prepared to leave the safety circle one last time. A dreadful suspicion crept into my mind. What if this voice was not truly Dr. Reed? What if the entities had perfectly mimicked her to deceive me into leaving? Yet the heat was tangible, the smoke was suffocating, and I could hear the roar of engulfing flames behind me. Stay and surely face death, or leave and risk the unknown. To die, or to escape and possibly fall into a trap. Such a choice weighed heavily on me. I inhaled deeply the increasingly polluted air and stepped beyond the circle. Instantly, I felt vulnerable and exposed, as if countless eyes were fixated on me from the smoke-shrouded corners of the tower. "I am leaving the tower," I announced into the radio, moving toward the northeast in the direction of the river. "Good," Dr. Reed answered. "Hurry, but be cautious. The team and James will locate you. Under all circumstances, keep the manual with you. The rules apply even beyond the tower." With one final glance at the protective circle that had shielded me throughout the night, I pushed open the door and descended the steps. Immediately, smoke surrounded me, thick and suffocating, while the heat was relentless. The fire's roar grew louder near the tower's base. Orienting myself northeast with the compass, the same one I'd been winding every day at noon, I began to sprint. Behind me, flames clawed at the lower supports of Tower 19. Whether by fate or intention, I was now outside the containment zone, beyond the rules and rituals that maintained the barrier's strength. I was lost in the forest, fleeing for my life with beings from another dimension possibly in pursuit. Somewhere ahead, I hoped Dr. Reed and the evacuation crew awaited me, if they truly existed and were coming at all. Amid the smoke and chaos, an eerie sound cut through the air. I thought I could hear laughter. Not human laughter, but something old, dreadful, and filled with anticipation beyond comprehension. Malice Tower. 19 was engulfed in flames, the door swinging open, and I was sprinting directly into the unknown. The forest had transformed into a nightmarish scene while smoke billowed among the trees, making visibility mere feet ahead. Flames jumped swiftly from one treetop to another, creating a blazing ceiling above me. The heat was overwhelming and the roar deafening. I ran without direction, relying only on the compass and the faint hope that Dr. Reed's instructions were accurate. 2 miles to the northeast lay the river. My lungs ached with every breath, and my eyes flowed from the thick smoke. Every instinct urged me to stop and seek cleaner air, yet I knew halting meant certain death. Behind me, through the smoky veil, came the sound of Tower 19 collapsing with a thunderous crash. The noise sent shivers down my spine despite the inferno's intense heat. The containment structure was no longer intact, and any protection it once provided was now destroyed. I stumbled over hidden roots and stones, falling again and again, only to push myself upright and keep running. My throat felt raw, as if each breath sliced through it. The burden of my backpack holding the manual seemed to grow heavier with every step. Amid the chaos, I struggled to remember the rules. What time could it be? Around 8:45 a.m., I guessed. Was there some regulation to follow at this moment? My smoke-clouded mind could not recall. Suddenly, a gigantic pine tree crashed down ahead, sending a shower of sparks into the air. Disoriented, I veered sharply to the side. Checking my compass again, it still pointed northeast, even though I had been forced to take a detour. A voice called out from inside the smoke, sounding familiar but distorted. Ranger Hawkins, this way. I found a clear path. I hesitated. Was this really Hawkins, somehow alive against all odds, or just some other creature trying to mislead me? "Julia, hurry," the voice urged, more urgently this time. Rule number 5 flashed through my mind. If you hear your name called 3 times in a row, do not answer, no matter how much it sounds like someone you trust. This was not exactly 3 times straight, but close enough to put me on alert. I chose to ignore the voice and continued following the compass's direction. The voice twisted, losing its human sound, turning into a growl of anger and frustration. "You are heading the wrong way." I quickened my pace despite the burning lungs and trembling legs. The manual thudding against my back with every step was a constant reminder of what was at stake. Through the trees ahead, I spotted movement, tall, slender figures moving with that odd, jerky elegance I had glimpsed from the tower's periphery. They were no longer distant shadows or brief silhouettes. The boundary protecting me was weakening. I altered my course slightly, trying to avoid them, but still kept mostly northeast. The smoke thinned for a moment, letting me see a clearing up ahead. Hoping it would offer an easier route, I headed toward it. As I burst into the clearing, I skidded to a standstill, frozen with fear. This was no ordinary open space. The trees had been twisted and reshaped into unnatural forms, their trunks and branches curved to create a perfect circle. At the center of this circle lay a symbol scorched into the earth, resembling the protective circle I had drawn in the tower, but strangely reversed. Something felt deeply wrong about it. Surrounding this inverted circle were figures that appeared human in shape but distorted in every detail. They were unusually tall and thin, their limbs bending at unnatural angles, and their faces kept changing right before my eyes. Among them, I could make out Ranger Hawkins, members of the evacuation team, and even a grotesque imitation of Julia. None of them had noticed me yet, their attention fixed completely on the ritual unfolding around the inverted circle. The space above the symbol flickered and warped like waves of heat, but with more purpose, forming shapes that strained my vision. I stepped back cautiously, trying to remain silent, but my foot snapped a branch loudly, piercing the quiet between the crackling fires. Instantly, every creature turned towards me, their faces, if they could be called that, twisted into expressions filled with ravenous eagerness. "The vessel arrives," one of them spoke, his voice rough as grinding stones. "The key approaches. 3 violations complete." Another hissed, "One remains." 3. I'd only knowingly broken one rule by looking at Tower 14 during the forbidden hour. Had I accidentally crossed more? Without fully understanding, the tower ignited, a third being appearing as the circle was shattered. The door swung open and they started approaching me with a strange, staggered motion. I whirled to flee but was stopped by more of them rising from the smoke. Like living nightmares, I found myself trapped, the manual pressed firmly against my back, suddenly feeling like the most vital thing in existence. No matter what happened, I could not let them seize it. Breaking the 4th rule was not an option. "Give us the book, James Dawson," said the entity wearing Ranger Hawkins's shape, extending a hand that stretched unnaturally long as it reached toward me. "Complete the final transgression and open the door fully." "Never," I gasped, my voice hoarse from the smoke. "You have no choice," stated another, this one bearing the face of a female evacuation team member. "If the barrier falls, we come through regardless of your aid. However, your cooperation would make the transition easier for all." "For you, perhaps," I shot back, "but not for humanity." The being resembling Julia smiled, the expression distorting her face in impossible ways. Humanity had its chance. This world belongs to us now. We only reclaim what was stolen. They pressed forward, tightening the circle around me. I clung to the backpack against my chest, my mind racing. I had no weapons, no protective circle, no tower rules as backup, only the manual itself and any rules that still applied beyond the containment zone. "The rules," I whispered to myself. I desperately tried to remember any rule that could apply to my situation. Rule number 21 about peripheral vision was useless because they were completely visible now. Rule number 3 about leaving the tower had already been broken out of necessity. Then it came to me. Rule number 27 in case of a direct attack. Create a protective circle, mix salt, your blood, and ash from the fireplace, draw the symbol from page 86 on the ground, and stand inside it without leaving until the attack ends, no matter what you see or hear. I had salt in my pocket. I'd grabbed a handful before leaving the tower. Blood could be provided from my already injured hands, and ash was plentiful due to the forest fire. Moving as fast as I could, I pulled the salt from my pocket and started pouring it in a circle around me, adding ash from the burning forest floor. I cut my palm deeper with my knife, letting blood drip into the mixture. "He is protecting himself," one entity hissed. "Stop him!" They lunged forward, but not quickly enough. I finished the rough circle and began to draw the symbol from memory, the 5-pointed star, the strange glyphs, and the interconnected smaller circles. As I completed the final line, a wave of energy radiated outward from the circle. The entities shrieked in frustration and fury, recoiling. They circled just outside the boundary, probing and searching for weaknesses. "It will not hold," the Hawkins entity said. "Not here, not outside." The containment was breaking down just as he had predicted. I could already see it. The energy of the circle flickered, and the barrier it formed trembled, unlike the tower where the containment system operated with absolute authority. Here in the forest, my hastily sketched circle was nothing more than a desperate last resort. I knew I had to keep moving. The river could not be far now if I could reach it before the circle collapsed entirely. I took the manual from my backpack, holding it tight against my chest with one hand, while stretching out the other, trying to hold the failing barrier by sheer determination. Northeast, I whispered while glancing at the compass once again. The river should lie just beyond the next ridge. If only I could push through this ring of entities, I might survive. But they appeared to sense my plans, spreading out to block every escape path, and watching me with those shifting, unnatural eyes as my barrier weakened with every passing second. The fire encroached, too, advancing through the forest in all directions. The smoke grew thicker, making it difficult to see the creatures clearly, though perhaps that worked in my favor. Trapped between flames and nightmares, with a crumbling shield and a manual that seemed more useless outside the tower, the radio in my pocket suddenly crackled to life. James Dr. Dawson's voice came through faintly amid the static. "We have triangulated your location. We are moving in from the east arrival in about 3 minutes. Hold your position." Hope surged within me as help was only minutes away. "They are here," I shouted toward the entities, attempting to sound more assured than I truly felt. "Your plan has failed," the Hawkins entity sneered, its laughter shattering the air like breaking glass. "They will not arrive in time. The circle crumbles." At that moment, the door swung open, emphasizing his words. My protective circle flickered wildly, parts fading entirely before reigniting with renewed vigor. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, stalling for time. "Why choose me?" The Julia entity replied. "You were selected. Empty, hollow, the ideal vessel for the first to pass through." "I'm not empty," I argued. "I have a life, memories, relationships." Another entity interjected. "Failed relationships, failed career, failed marriage, a failed life. You came to Tower 19 fleeing your failures. Your emptiness calls to us and resonates with the void between worlds." Those words echoed painfully true. Grief and shame had hollowed me out. Yet, standing here fighting for my survival and potentially the fate of the world, I no longer felt empty. I felt fury, resolve, and purpose. "You are mistaken," I said with conviction. "I am not empty, and I will never be yours." The protective circle sparked once more, this time for longer. The entities tensed, ready to strike. Just as the circle threatened to collapse, I heard movement among the trees to the east, engines, voices, activity. The evacuation team was near. "James, Doctor," Reed's voice called. "We're coming." "Almost there. Hold on," the Hawkins entity growled angrily. "They will not interfere. The transition is nearly finished." With a burst of terrifying force, he pushed his extended hand directly toward my protective circle. The moment it made contact, the barrier shattered like fragile glass, creating a breach. Immediately, the other beings advanced, reaching for me with their 2 lengthy arms and numerous jointed fingers. In a desperate move, I grabbed the manual and flipped rapidly to page 86, where the protocol for the detective's circle was outlined. There had to be some way to reinforce it. As I turned the page, I noticed tiny text at the bottom that I had missed before. In extreme situations where all other protections collapse, the manual itself can serve as a last defense. However, caution is required since using the book in this way destroys it. Breaking rule number 4, which forbids destroying the manual or trying to change the rules, results in immediate and irreversible consequences. The entities were forcing their way through the damaged part of my circle now, their limbs reaching toward me and the manual. Voices from the evacuation team were getting closer, but still not near enough. I had only moments to make a choice. Violating rule number 4 would be the 4th breach, the one that would fully open the barrier between worlds. Yet, if I did not act, the beings would seize the manual and me as well. The book. Mr. Dawson, the Hawkins entity, snarled, his hand just inches from my face. Give us the book, complete the cycle. Open the door. Time seemed to slow as that moment of crystal clarity I realized the entities were not merely after the manual. They needed me to willingly break rule number 4. They required me to carry out the 4th transgression of my own accord. That was the secret, my conscious cooperation in unlocking the door. Never, I whispered with newfound determination. I tore a page from the manual. Not to destroy it, but to follow the instructions, holding the page like a shield. I concentrated all my willpower into it, envisioning it as part of a protective circle. The reaction was instant and startling. The page ignited in blue flames. The fire rapidly spread, engulfing the entire manual without harming my hands. The entities shrank back, screaming with what sounded like authentic fear. The blazing manual throbbed with energy, forcing the entities beyond my shattered circle. The flames blazed with supernatural force, but did not consume the pages. Instead, the fire appeared to awaken something within the text itself, making the strange symbols and rules glow with an inner light. This was not destruction, it was a metamorphosis. I was not violating rule number 4. I was realizing the manual's true purpose. No, the Hawkins entity howled. Not like this. The door must open. The path must be cleared. The burning manual continued to pulse with energy. Each surge drove the entities farther away. The flames expanded. They surrounded me as well, but they did not burn. Instead, they felt cool, almost comforting against my smoke-scorched skin. Amidst the trees, figures emerged, people in tactical gear, led by a woman I assumed was Dr. Reed. They raised strange-looking weapons, firing not bullets, but beams of intense light. These beams struck the entities, causing them to writhe and twist in pain. "James," Dr. Reed said, "use the manual to complete the transformation." The manual in my hands was shifting, its pages rearranging themselves. The text flowed and morphed, forming new patterns and new rules. This was not destruction, but rather evolution. The manual was becoming something entirely new and more potent. A wave of understanding surged through me. Tower 19 was not merely a containment facility, it was an engine of transformation. The rules were not mere restrictions, but a process, a technique to channel and regulate the energy leaking from the other side. I was not only a watchman, but a catalyst chosen for this precise moment. With renewed certainty, I raised the transforming manual high, letting its energy pour through me and radiate outward. The entity screamed and twisted, caught in the powerful wave unleashed by the book. By the force of these rules, I intoned words that emerged from nowhere and everywhere. I seal the way. I close the door. I reject your passage and deny your claim. The manual flared brilliantly bright before collapsing into a singularity of pure energy that hovered before me. For a breathtaking instant, the energy was held between my palms before suddenly bursting outward in a shock wave powerful enough to knock me off my feet. As I fell, I caught sight of the beings dissolving, their shapes unraveling like smoke caught in a fierce wind. Their anguished cries gradually faded, replaced by a piercing, pure tone that seemed to vibrate with the very essence of existence. The last image before I lost consciousness was Dr. Reed rushing towards me, her face a blend of wonder and worry. Behind her, the forest fire was inexplicably dying down, the flames vanishing as if an enormous hand had extinguished them. Then darkness enveloped me, and I was lost to the world. When I regained awareness, I was met with the rhythmic beeping of hospital machines and the sterile scent typical of medical environments. My throat was raw, and my lungs felt heavy, yet oxygen gently flowed through a nasal cannula. Bandages wrapped around my hands, and other severe burns and lacerations. Dr. Eleanor Reed sat at my bedside, appearing worn out but clearly relieved. She seemed younger than expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with prematurely gray hair tightly pulled back in a strict bun and sharp, observant eyes fixed on me. "Welcome back," she said as soon as she noticed I was conscious. "You have been unconscious for 3 days." The entities? I rasped, my voice barely croaking. The barrier is sealed, she declared firmly, more completely than we have ever achieved before. What you accomplished with the manual was not mere containment. It was full closure. You did not simply drive them away. You shut the door entirely. I struggled to comprehend this. The manual had transformed. It was not destruction, but something far more profound, a metamorphosis. It was completed for me. Yes, we had suspected this could be achievable in theory, but never before had anyone successfully carried out the entire process. The manual was intended to develop if the right catalyst, the right individual, unlocked its full capability. Why me? I inquired that question had troubled me throughout the entire ordeal. She offered a faint smile. We do not select the watchman at random for Tower 19. Rather, we search for particular psychological patterns, certain emotional conditions, people who have faced loss, failure, and emptiness, yet possess the capacity for profound growth and change. You exploited me, I accused faintly. We provided you with a chance, she corrected softly, to save yourself while also saving others, and you surpassed even our most optimistic hopes. I glanced at my bandaged hands. The former watchman, Daniel Weiss, what became of him? Dr. Reed's face darkened as he replied, He violated all 4 rules on purpose, believing the entity's deception that it would liberate him. Instead, he caused a partial breach between worlds, becoming trapped in the in-between realm, neither fully present here nor there. We were unable to rescue him. I said, I heard him. Under the trap, she agreed. Part of him stayed linked to our reality, trying to alert later watchmen about his fate. You are the first to pay attention, and others from towers, 14, 11, and 23 were compromised, but contained. Now your deeds have initiated a chain reaction, reinforcing all the defenses at once. She leaned closer. You accomplished something extraordinary, Julia, something we never believed could happen. What is supposed to occur now? I inquired. For now, you rest and heal, she replied, pausing briefly. We have other locations that could benefit from someone with your rare background if you are willing. I thought about it. 3 weeks earlier, I had accepted the fire lookout position to escape my ruined past, to hide from regret and humiliation. Now, a new opportunity to make a real difference had been presented to me. I will consider it, I said. Dr. Reed nodded with empathy in her expression. Take all the time you need. There is no hurry. She rose to leave. Oh, and one more thing. We discovered this clutched in your hand after the incident. We could not remove it until you were stable. She gave me a small leather-bound notebook. Not the old lookout's journal, but something new, its pages filled with handwriting I did not recognize. What is this? I asked, turning it over carefully in my bandaged hands. We are not completely certain, she confessed, but we believe it might be the next version, new instructions perhaps, for whatever awaits ahead. She left me alone with the notebook, my mind full of questions. I opened it with caution, reading the first sentence inscribed in flowing penmanship. The gate is sealed, but other pathways remain. The watchers must stay alert. The guidelines have shifted, yet the responsibility continues. Begin again. Outside my hospital window, just for a brief moment, the shadows appeared to shift. They moved in ways they should not have, reaching toward me with clear intention. I blinked, and they returned to normal once more. Just ordinary shadows cast by everyday things, but I saw through the illusion now. The world was layered with hidden realities, dimensions overlapping, guarded portals between them, and creatures hungry to get through. Somehow, I had become a keeper of those gateways, not because I was gifted or strong, but because I had been empty enough to find a new purpose. The notebook felt warm in my grasp, vibrant with potential. Whatever awaited, I was prepared. The rules had shifted, yet my responsibility remained. This time I accepted it fully aware. Half a year later, I stood on a wind-blown hill overlooking a different forest, in a different state. Behind me stood a structure resembling a fire lookout tower only outwardly. Its true function was a guarded secret known to very few. Dr. Reed Eleanor, as I now addressed her, had been correct about the notebook. It housed not just new regulations, but strategies for not only containment, but active defense against threats crossing over. I had spent countless months studying and internalizing its lessons, readying myself for this moment. The Paranormal Research Department had erected this facility, informed by knowledge drawn from what had become known as the Tower 19 incident. I was its inaugural guardian, the first watchman, though the official title had shifted to barrier technician. In my pocket lay a photo. I kept as a memory the image of Tower 19, or what was left of it after the blaze, a charred framework silhouetted against the sky. The area was now off-limits, enclosed by government barriers and signs warning about environmental dangers. The true cause of these restrictions was known only to those with the highest security clearance. I glanced at my watch. It was 5:27 in the evening. The moment had come for the first ceremony of the night. Opening my notebook to page 17, I began chanting the spell written there, my voice calm and assured. As I finished the last phrase, a faint ripple stirred in the air around the tower, the protective shield growing stronger and more solid. The spirits had been quiet since Tower 19 had been pushed back more effectively than ever before. But we knew they remained out there, observing, waiting for another chance, another vulnerability, another gateway. I often pondered about the former guardian, Daniel Weiss, trapped eternally in a liminal state. I wondered if he had found some solace in knowing his warnings had helped me succeed where he had not. I sincerely hoped that was the case. Then my phone vibrated with a message from Eleanor reporting that readings were normal and the defense intact. I replied with a brief confirmation and resumed my tasks. The new protocols were far more intricate than the previous ones, yet also more coherent and purposeful. At last, I comprehended the nature of my role and its significance, which made everything feel more meaningful. When darkness fell completely, I carried out the evening reinforcement ritual, watching with satisfaction as the protective energy strengthened. A soft blue light traced the outlines of the structure's edges, confirming the fence's strength. In the distance, right at the periphery of my sight, I occasionally noticed tall, slender shapes moving through the trees. They never came close to the tower, never challenged the fence, but they observed constantly, always keeping watch. Let them watch, I thought. I no longer felt afraid. I was no longer hollow, no longer fleeing, no longer lost. I had discovered my purpose in one of the most unexpected places, a fire lookout tower in Black Ridge National Forest, where I had confronted unimaginable terrors and emerged changed. Tower 19 had taken everything from me, but then gave me something far more valuable. The door was locked tight, the rules were altered, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be.